And then we have a comment here from Hermes Paranormal Spirit Chair 930. History is definitely important. Praise the All Father for bringing knowledge and wisdom to us all. And of course, I'm so glad that as a individual, I've not had to go to Mimir's role and take and sacrifice an eye just to gain wisdom, which I think is a whole feat in itself. Could you imagine putting your eyeball out and cutting it off? And I'm sure, people have probably done that in the past when their eye is infected or they're blind in one eye. And of course, it always reminds me of the old and famous Viking Egil Skallagrimsson, who ended up in his old age being blind. I think we see this reference in The Last Kingdom in the first episode or the second episode. I think it's the first one when, he gets adopted by this Viking family, and in the background of this longhouse is a old and wise Viking, but his eyesight has failed him, and they have to look after him. So I think that's fascinating, and we do take, our eyes for granted. So you have to forgive me. I'm just opening up a beer, I'm thirsty, and it's a little bit late for a cup of tea. So I thought I'll have a beer. In fact, I'm going to have a what you call I think it's a Mickey Mouse. So I'm being a Norse person. I'm opening two beers up at the same time. So this is a live stream where I'm going to read your comments and talk about anything you want me to talk about. I can talk about what I'm doing on the channel, some of the adventures we're having, and of course today is always a special day on the channel, for it is indeed the 9th of the month. And what does that mean? If you're new to the channel, you may not know that in the past, we had an excellent and amazing channel host who joined me in 2018 called Egil Thusson. And, sadly, Egil passed away in 2023. I was talking about this to my neighbours earlier. It's typical because Egil, he had nothing but bad luck throughout his whole life. And he had just retired from working for many years. And he got a foot infection, which ended in sepsis, and he very suddenly passed away. So today is a special day because it's the day when we remember our late and great brother, Egil. And his real name was Sai in the modern world. And, I think it's amazing what he did for the channel. I wish I filmed more with him, but I did manage to film a lot of content, including a whole series on the older Firth arc, which I'm going to make into a course in the future, because courses are a new thing. And another thing I'm working on at the moment is I'm doing a series on how to be a Viking. That's going to be a 50 video series. Oh yes, 50 videos. And then I think, talking about courses, I'm going to make a load of videos where I'm going to teach you some of the fundamental aspects of being a Norse warrior, like how to wear your sword properly, how to wear a cloak, how to find your perfect hat, because a lot of this isn't out there in the public domain, and I think we really do. So just go and read your comments. Yes, and always praise the All Father. We have another comment. I was actually meditating on this recently, and I was amazed by this. I love learning with all my heart, but I don't think I could bring myself to cutting my eye out for it. Also, skull. Well, yes, I think, if you're going to sacrifice your eye, I think I would probably get very, 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 very drunk first. And then, the knife will be waving around. I'll probably take the one guy out. I mean, and it does make you think, I think it was his left or right eye. Now, there is, within the Sutton Hoo helmet, they recently discovered that with the eyebrows, one of the eyebrows has a different shade of red to the other. So they're speculating that in the Sutton Hoo home, one of the reasons why the two eyebrows were slightly different colour, rubies they used, was because it was a sign of Odin. So is it his left or right? I'm trying to think what they have it. What do they have it in the movies? I think it's his right eye, but I could be wrong, because these are one of the many aspects that we don't think about and we don't talk about, and it's not fundamentally written down in the sagas. They're too busy thinking about writing the stories down, and sometimes we lose a little bit of that detail. but there are some, you know, a couple of manuscript illustrations which are a little bit later from the 11th and 12th century, portraying Odin, the All-Father, and it does make you think. And of course, to the English, to the pre-Christian Saxons, we called him Woden, of course. So perhaps, you know, I should call him Woden, being from England, more than I should call him Odin. And then you could also spell it with two N's or one N. It depends, really. So, yes, we'll just go back to your comments. We've got another one here from Setting Dawn Zero. How are you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, I thought whilst I'm not busy editing videos, answering comments, filming, I thought I'll come and film, do a live stream. I must try to get back into live streaming a little bit more, but not everything goes to plan in my life because I get so distracted here, there, and everywhere. But it is something I'm trying to focus on a little bit more in the future. And I've got quite a bit of sewing to do on various things. Like I want to put this fur around this hat at some point. So when I'm going to be doing my sewing and making things, it's like this bag, for instance, needs a repair job because whoever put it together didn't do a very good job on the upper part of this section. They should have put a reinforcement stitch because it's split, and that's just from sitting on it and standing up. So when you do make things, you've got to make things well and think about where you need your reinforcement stitches and so forth. Yeah, I do it by hand because it's a wonderful thing to do. And my table's quite messy at the moment. I've got hats, I've got arm guards, which I didn't really have, a sheath, I've got another hat, I've got a pouch. There's all sorts on my table. But just going back to the beer, because I've been filming all afternoon. I'm trying to get out whilst the weather is nice, and this is the third time this week I've actually filmed. So perhaps I should try doing half an hour, 1 hour live stream in the afternoon when I'm filming, because I've probably got the time. And I'm glad it's warm. If it gets really cold, I'm going to do this and hide away. Hello, I'm hiding. And there's a really, really good video on Modern History TV who talks about cloaks and hoods and how you can adapt them. And yeah, this is actually more of an Iron Age cloak, but I'm just wearing it because it's very nice and warm, and it's made from linen, and it's got a linen lining. And in between, when I made it, I put a layer of felt as an experiment to make it a little bit stiffer and a little bit warmer, because 2 layers of linen isn't going to be as warm as 2 layers of wool, for instance. So I thought to myself, well, we know back in the day that they had the ability to make felt out of wool. And it's also another way you can make a lining for a hat, which I'll have to talk about in another video. So in my mind, when I made this cloak, I thought to myself, well, if I do it from 2 layers of linen, it's going to be quite thin. So I thought, well, why would they not put a layer of felt or even a layer of wool inside, or another layer of linen to make it even warmer? Because that's one of the part of the ideas of wearing a cloak and having a cloak, is because it gives you warmth. So yeah. So we have a comment here. He says, I never thought about which eye. I had no idea that there isn't agreed upon consensus on which eye. Well, yeah, I got no doubt there's probably some people that specialise in Norse mythology who probably have that answer more than I do. There's that German writer, is it Gruber, who wrote the Encyclopedia of Norse mythology, and perhaps it may be a little bit in there, but it's such a complex book. And I'm sure if Tirkir was here, the first channel host, which I'm hoping to get back on the channel in the future, because his knowledge is like 100 times my knowledge. But then again, that's because he was reenacting Vikings and Saxons in the 1980s when I was a wee lad down here. So, yeah. And then we have a comment here from Setting Dawn Zero. What do you think about Loki trying to discredit and deceive people, especially men, from working with Sidlir? Well, yeah. I mean, that was something that Loki had his ability to do and practice, and I don't know a lot about that practicing side of the religion when it comes to Norse paganism, but you can see why he would go down that route, because if he controlled the power and the magic, then and not let mortal men like us have that ability, then that will give him more power. But don't forget, when it comes to the Norse gods, by far the most trickiest god was indeed Odin himself. He was the true trickster, and it does make you think, because Odin, adopted Loki, of course, and we all know the story. It does make you think whether Loki's developed that, aspect of being a trickster from the Allfather himself. But again, that's a whole entire different story, and I think it's a fascinating story which does need exploring. I mean, it's a shame, really is a shame, so much of these manuscripts and so much of these stories and stories from the sagas have been lost, mostly because they either got destroyed, burnt, stolen. The Christians didn't like to keep such things, so no doubt the monasteries and the monks and the bishops would control that information, because when you control information, you control people. So it does make you think about that. So let me take the first sip of this beer. That's not too bad. But it does, when I've been out speaking all day and filming, it does make you thirsty, and it does make you hungry as well. Let's just put that down over there. We'll tidy up my table. And I do love doing these live streams when I do read your comments. And at some point, I'm building up to make hats. So again, if anybody ever wants a pattern for a hat, just let me know and I'll send it to you for free on Facebook, because I have done a lot of research, and then I try to it's like, here's another one, very simplistic pattern, very simplistic hat, but it does keep your head warm. So Sitting Dawn says, when was the last time you drank mead? I had some actually at the weekend. I had a small glass because it was Easter, and so I've got a massive demijohn, and it's got 4 gallons of mead in, and it did have 5 gallons, but over the time it's gradually started to get a little bit less. But I'm sure you agree, having 4 gallons of mead is quite a bit. And that was mead that my late father made, and he made that in 1977. So it's been in this big glass bottle ever since then. At some point, I'm going to maybe bottle some up and give a little bit of it away to friends and special people who I like, and to test it. It's not a mead anymore. It's more of a liqueur. So a mead, fundamentally, like honey, lasts for years, and I'm very lucky. The honey I'm eating at the moment from a jar is from 1983. So what? It's 44 years old, roughly, thinking about it, roughly 47, 45. I think it's 44. So, and honey, and the only thing that honey will do is set. So when honey sets, it just gets very solid. So what you have to do is you put your jar in some not boiling water, but in some hot water, which is being slowly heated up, and then the honey inside the jar will go back to liquid. So Setting Dawn says, cool hats. I like it. Yeah, I made a lot of hats over the years, and it's definitely something I'm going to demonstrate. And most of these are the same design. I wouldn't know what you would call this one. This is just a standard medieval hat. This is actually made from a pair of Union blue trousers, because I was on camp many years ago and somebody threw a pair of trousers away, and I thought to myself, oh, that's quite a nice colour. At first, we used them for a pair of Union trousers from the Civil War. Then I thought to myself, oh no, I will actually turn them into hats. And they did have such colours, but some people may recognise that it's not. And then we also have this one, which is the infamous conical hat, which I do love. What it needs is a little bit of packing inside, because it's layered with felt on the inside. And again, I do have the patterns for these as well, and it's got a little bit of sewing on it as well. And then it's got some nice sewing, all been done by hand. And then when we look at the statues of Thor holding the hammer, he's fundamentally wearing a hat like this. This is not the best version of this hat. I got a red one, which is much better, as it kind of flattens a little bit. And then whenever I film these videos in this hat, because I do try to change the way I look in my thumbnails, so every time I film, I'm wearing something different. You know, I never wear the same clothing twice in 2 days. So I always try to change the thumbnails and have them as diverse as possible, because I just think it's important. Because let's face it, I mean, most Saxons and Norse people will probably have one outfit and maybe a best tunic if you got the coin. Not like today when I've got 20 pairs of jeans, and very much like in the reenactment world. I mean, I've probably got 5 or 6 at least pairs of Viking trousers, a dozen tunics and under tunics. So I'm not short of the kit, and I've got a lot of wool to make stuff out of, which I want to do on camera. And then Hemis Paranormal says, I've got to go. I've got to get going. Farewell to everyone, and may Odin and the gods keep you and your horn be ever flowing with mead and ale. Oh yes, I mean we often think about, you know, mead and honey was one of those things, and beekeeping was very highly practiced throughout the medieval times. And I actually know an awful lot about beekeeping because I've grown up with bees all around me, as my dad was a beekeeper. At one point he had 40 hives on the go, 30, 40 years ago. And as a child, I used to help my dad to, change the hive and take the things out. I had a thing over my head. So, yeah, I mean, beekeeping is a fascinating thing. I've seen a few people on YouTube doing medieval beekeeping and showing what it would look like. Of course, the monasteries and the monks were famous for beekeeping. They liked to drink just like any other good Norseman. And if you're lucky, you may have a drinking horn the size of that. I mean, and I would put my beer in it, but it's probably very dusty. It's very dusty. But, imagine you're at the drinking table and, you fill this up with beer. I think it holds about 4 or 5 pints. And you can't really put it down on the table. Maybe just demonstrate. It's very difficult. Let me just move some things out of the way. It's very difficult to actually put a horn down because it's going to leak out unless you've got a very small amount of alcohol and beer in there. And yeah, I mean, there's some speculation that they had iron holders you could put them in, but I think that's fundamentally a waste of iron. You have to be very excessive, and I think it's more of a modern reenactorism to have a holder. And don't forget, in those times, drinking was vastly a part of their culture, very much like us English and British people. So you got to drink it, and then you have to turn it sideways as you drink, because if you don't drink it properly, the amount of times I've seen people and reenactors, they get a drinking horn, they're really excited, and they pour the beer in, and then they start drinking this way. Well, what happens? You get an airlock, and then very suddenly, all the ale and beer goes all over you. So as you drink, you got to turn the horn and then drink. And at some point, when I wash this out and give it a clean, I'm going to make a video on how to drink out of a horn. It's also got a very nice mounting as well. So again, it's got the symbolism of an animal, because animal symbolism is just such an important thing of not only the Anglo-Saxon culture, but also the Norse culture. And as we progress into the 8th and 9th and 10th century, these animal motifs became lesser and lesser and lesser. So it's more associated with the early pagan times, having an animal motive. And again, what does this say about the individual who owns this horn? It says that they're wealthy, because the average man may have a little tiny horn, but this is a symbol of your status. This says, I have the status to be an earl or a housecarl or even a chieftain, and possibly a king. But if this was a king's or somebody of very high ranking, then it will have silver or gold mounts around here and all manners of designs and animal motifs, and maybe a band here as well, an ability to, with a sling, sometimes you can see him slung. So yeah, and that's a massive cow horn. Imagine the cow that came from. So, what do you think about extraterrestrials, and have you seen or experienced any? Well, if you take Drake's law, so Drake's law basically says that there's so many solar systems, and in the solar system there's going to be so many star systems, and in those star systems there's going to be planets that will align with the Goldilocks area of that planetary system, which could support life. So on that basis, mathematically, then yes, extraterrestrials do exist. And this is something I may talk about more in the video, as I'm trying and I'm recording and bringing back the 3-minute mystery history Monday videos, which will be a bonus long form video where I get to cover different subjects to open up the channel more. But in the 1990s, I used to be a UFO researcher and investigator for, I think it was BUFON, the British UFO Network, and with another local group, I was into paranormal research. And so, you know, we would hear somebody or say, oh, I've had an encounter, and I will get invited with somebody else and we'll go and interview them, write down notes, and it'll be from, you know, from the minimum of seeing a UFO to people claiming that they've been abducted. And, you know, there's some very good books. Dr. Bud Hoskins, I think, was a famous UFO investigator. I can't remember all the names. I'm going back to the 90s here. And I do have a lot of books on UFOs. But, you know, as you get older, I got all these brain cells, and somewhere in there is all my UFO information. And I've seen a series from Dan Aykroyd, who's massively into UFOs as well. And of course, don't forget, we live in a world full of censorship, you know. So have humanity been in contact with aliens? I don't know, but I think there's a high possibility. And what are all the UFOs that people are seeing? You know, is it a mass hallucination, for instance? And then a lot of cases, say, for instance, you may get 100 cases, right? You know, 98% of them are going to be, or 95% are going to be planes or comets or other things in the sky. Whereas a very small percentage, you know, 1 or 2% could be very genuine cases. So, and we do know, you know, under the disclosure movement, which has been happening for quite a while, under there's a Dr. Greer. Can't remember his first name. Now, he's been doing a lot of very fascinating videos, and I think it's definitely worthwhile in watching some of his videos. I can't remember his first name, but it'll come back to me in a minute. Oh, I hate it when I can't remember something. It's not David. It'll come back in a minute. So yeah, I think this is where I need another mobile phone so I could look for you. But yeah, so I think, yeah, Dr. Greer, yes, he's great. He's fascinating. And then I think it's Dr. David M. Jacobs, who is a professor in, I think, in neurology, and he was brought into the field in the 80s and the 90s to do research. And he started off as a skeptic. He was very much a skeptic, and he kind of now got to the point, and Dr. David M. Jacobs is one of the top people for investigating and doing reverse hypnosis on UFO abductees. And then there's also the late and great Dr. John Mack, who died in a very mysterious car accident. And I think the less we say about that, the better. But yeah, so, and I think, and I talk about this to my friends, that, you know, let's just say, you know, Donald Trump tomorrow decides that he's going to release every information, every file on UFOs, and basically disclose the fact that, you know, since World War II, since the crash in Roswell in 1947, humanity and our world leaders and a select number of countries have had contact with aliens. Can you imagine what that will do to the world tomorrow? It'll be like me coming on the channel and saying, oh, I've now got the proof that Odin exists, and here he is. Say hello, Odin. Could you imagine that on camera? Or suddenly Thor just flashing a flash and Thor appears. It'll be groundbreaking. But the government and the world government cannot simply just tell you that, because simply and I will get back to your messages in a minute. I'll just see. You can't just disclose that without programming everybody. So yeah, you don't need to delete your comments. Reznov's Hole says, "Are you from?" He says, "I'm a reenactor. I've got a photographic memory," and he says, "Are you from England?" Oh, that's great that you are a reenactor, and a warm welcome to the channel. And yes, I'm from Derby. That's in the Midlands, and I've been a reenactor since 1993. When I was 17 years old, I got into reenacting with a friend of mine called Sean. I pretty much had to go at most things from, the Iron Age up to, I even did a weekend once where we got hired to portray the Vietnam War. But we had a problem because we had a lot of guys dressed as Americans, but we had no VC, the Viet Cong. So the organisation that organised it, and it was in Birmingham, hired all these Chinese takeaway workers and gave them fake AK-47s, and we had a battle with them. It was most amusing, and I wish I had a camera to record video back in the day. So Resnos Hall 9198 says, "I am also a reenactor. Do you only do it in England?" Well, I've not been a reenactor for a while because only until recently I was caring. I was a full-time carer for my late father who passed away. And I'm just kind of getting over that aspect of my life and another chapter's starting. So since my last time I reenacting really was in 2016 when I was had my own regiment in the American Civil War Society, which is where this sign comes from, because that was my sign I had outside my tent, just to let the officers and people know that that's where we are based. So I've not reenacted since 2016 because by the time I got to 2016, my dad got so ill with his Alzheimer's and dementia that I couldn't really travel away anymore. So I became housebound looking after my dad. And, my dad was a really great and amazing character, somebody that I really, really miss. And, and I definitely got a lot of my dad's mannerisms and likes and so forth. And we do the same hobbies. And he was 92 when he died, so he had a good innings. And he had a very large business, which changed a lot of people's lives. And so I really became housebound. And then COVID came along and we all had, to stay indoors. Well, I was already used to that. I was literally probably getting out on average once a week for about 5 hours. I was meeting a guy called Thomas Dale, who used to be a fan of the channel, but he's disappeared. And no matter how many times I text him, "Hello, Thomas, are you all right?" He never sends me a text back. But I hope he's all right because he's a lovely guy. And I think there's one live stream in a Wetherspoons pub we did together on the channel many years ago. So because of that, I kind of got to the point where I couldn't go away. I couldn't even leave the house to go to the shop unless I had carers in. So I really did become housebound. And caring is one of the most difficult jobs you can do in the world, but also one of the best jobs. And I wanted to look after my dad because I didn't want to put him in a home where I knew the stats, from research demonstrates that he wouldn't last as long as you would living at home. So I sacrificed those years of my life, but at the same time, I started this channel in 2017. I already previously had another gaming channel, which kind of started this journey and started me wanting to talk on camera. But all the time in the back of my mind, I was thinking at the time on YouTube, well, there's not a lot of stuff about Norse sagas and folk tales and Viking and Anglo-Saxon history. So talking to my very good friend Thorolf and Tyrkir, the mighty Thorkolfsson, I said, well, I've had this idea for a YouTube channel. I invited Tyrkir to join the channel. He started the channel and made about 60 videos. But I think then, by the time we got to the winter of 2017, I think it fundamentally burnt himself out with it because he was putting a lot of effort into telling tales. And back in those days, I had a really rubbish camera. And I wish I had a better camera in those days. It was such a problem as a content creator's point of view because I'm wanting to film quality content, but I was filming on a Samsung S6 camera, which is why when you see those old videos, there's a bit of a focus error where every couple of minutes the camera tries to struggle to focus on the individual and what's around us. And then luckily in 2018, a very good friend of Eggles, Anthony, gave us a I think it was a was it what it was an S20. I think it might have been even this camera. Yeah, he gave us this camera, a Samsung S20. And I was so grateful because the first time I could record in 4K and have a much better camera. And I really do desperately need to get a decent mobile because it's very frustrating when you want to film and you either don't have the space on your mobile or I just don't think the quality is good enough. And it'd be nice at some point to upgrade and I think this time I'm going to go for the Galaxy phone because it makes sense as a content creator to get the Google phone rather than a Samsung. So I'm working on that, but I very recently managed to get my decent camera working. So if you notice a difference in the quality of the content, it's because I'm now filming with that camera. I've had to invest a little bit of money because I didn't have any batteries for it, and as a content creator, you have to manage your battery and your space on your phone and on your hard disk. Because I'm trying to edit more through my PC rather than using YouTube Create. Which is why, if you see the recent shorts, I've actually now started making thumbnails for the shorts rather than doing it either in edit where I put a title, which is not great because it kind of takes away from the video. And if you want to use that video again, well, you got a bloody annoying title in the way. Then I noticed a few months back, about 6 weeks to 2 months back, that YouTube, if you go to the YouTube app itself and you go to your channel, you can now edit your short thumbnails and put a little bit of a text in. But I do wish they would update that so you could put circles and red arrows and stuff, because that would make a lot of my old content, and there's probably about 1,000 or 2,000 videos I've got to go through in the shorts format, which I need to do do thumbnail titles for, because back in those days we just had plain text. So yeah, so I'm constantly trying to improve the channel. I'm constantly trying to improve the way I film. And for the first time this year, I'm actually filming with a title already in mind and set and a description. Whereas previously, for the last 8 years, the way I filmed was, I got an idea. Well, let's talk about Dane Axes. We'll go outside and film a video. I'll have no script. I'll have no keywords. And some of those videos, I'm probably rambling a little bit. So I'm trying now to become better organised. I don't want scripts because I think scripts take away from content. And it's just too easy and lazy to have a script. But what it does help sometimes is to, for instance, on some of my videos, like the close-up deep dives into my Langsaxes, which I'm carrying on here at the moment, I'm having just keywords so that when I'm talking, I know what I'm going to talk about and I know the next subject. So it will start off origin, where did they get it, how much I pay, what's it made out of, why did they use it, and so forth, to give those videos a bit more structure. But generally, we have never used script and we've never really used keywords. It's something new for me. And I'm also trying to create the title before I create the video, because that does help. Well, these are the lessons you learn. And then Resnor Hole 9198 says, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I miss my dad. I mean, I still wake up and I swear to you, I can hear him shouting my name, Andrew. Even to the point where I get out of bed and then I realise halfway down the stairs, my dad's passed away. So if I'm half asleep, that does happen. And of course, literally within 12 days, first of all, Eggle passed away, and then 12 days later, my dad passed away. So within 1 month and 2 weeks, I lost the most two important people in my life, and I really do miss both of them. But I spoke quite a few times to Eggle about, what to do with the channel if he ever did pass away, because I know it's a morbid subject, but at the same time, I was quite aware that he was much older than me. Because if Eggle was alive now, he would be 70, So we both talked about it, and he said, well, I want to be remembered, Andy. That's my real name, Braggy. He said, I want to, pass away and people not to forget who I am. So this is one of the reasons why, I'm trying to carry on his memory and his legacy. and especially on the 9th, which is today, to put out a long form video from Errol, and also put out a shorter form which has never been seen before. Although today's long form's been seen before, but it's a re-edit. But I do have a lot of videos. There's probably about 100 long format history videos from Errol, and I've never published. And there's the same, roughly about the same in folk tales, and there's a few other videos as well, and there's a lot of short videos which I've recorded on many subjects which I've never published so far. So, you know, it's just that important aspect about remembering and word fame. So did you see the message about the ship? Yes, let me just go back. No, I probably missed that. Our group has a Viking ship. Can I message you separately about getting you on the boat? Oh, yes, please do. Please. If you go to Facebook and you type in Andy, then type in Braggy Magnusson, that's MAGNARSSON, and then Wright, WRIGHT. You can find me on Facebook, and anybody can have me on Facebook and, you know, have a chat. If you want cheering up, you know, I'm always there for people, because, you know, it's not just my channel, it's your channel. And also anybody fundamentally can be a host on the channel. You know, I'll come and film you, and I'm working closely with Iric, trying to get Iric back on the channel a bit more. But yeah, that'll be absolutely amazing. And I would really love to do that. It's been a long time since I've been on a long ship, and I think it will make great content. I'll come along and I'll tell you a few stories. I recorded a very good video on Tuesday about the death of Ragnar Lothbrok, and I think I'm going to publish that the weekend. I think it's one of the best videos I've done. Are you you're not the same group with Martin Belfast Brown, are you? Because I know his group is in no, you're in Ireland. He's in Northern Ireland in Belfast. And I know they've got, I think it's either 2 or 3 ships. Right, I'm just checking. But yeah, because I do want to go to Northern Ireland. I want to visit Martin, so I'll definitely plan my journey and come and meet you guys. You know, if you got an event I can come along to, I'll dig out my Saxon tent, because I'm quite lucky. You know, for the rest of my days, I can just fundamentally now concentrate on YouTube and content and traveling the world and making this content, and without getting too much into my personal situation, which is going to change dramatically. But you know, some of you may guess, some of you may not. So I want to use that to make better content, to travel, to do more, you know, to actually, for the first time, well, technically it's not the first time, because I went to an event last year and filmed, but I'm not publishing those videos yet. But I do want to like to go to castles and museums and go to events and meet amazing people and have people interviewed on camera, talk about Viking and Saxon life. And then slowly I'm building up doing a Roman impression, because I do have a little bit of Roman kit. I got a little bit of Celtic kit, so I want to bring that, because I've got a lot of Roman stories I want to tell you. I've got a lot of Celtic stories I want to tell you. And then eventually, you know, probably look at the 11th and 12th century, maybe get a longbow and do some content about Robin Hood. So I do want to be more diverse in the future, but our heritage and our origin is always going to be the Norse and the Saxons, because, you know, they're sort of fascinating cultures. But let's not forget the Jutes and the Angles and the Frisians. So we have a comment here from King Edward, the Turbulent Neil 26. He says, "Ahoy there!" And he says, "Awesome helmets and shield." Yeah, and Resner Hall 9198 says, "Always wanted to do Roman stuff, but the Roman group don't fight too much." Yeah, and yeah, I think I did one weekend as a cult, and we had a guy who was a bit mad, and he said, "Well, you know, oh, you guys are throwing me over their shield wall." And we literally threw him with 2 of us over his shield wall. I don't think I threw him, because I don't think I was strong enough. But yeah, I think so. It's enough Viking biscuit. Oh yeah. I've got a nice bit of pork here cooked. So forever the Viking. This is my breakfast. Yeah, so we do have a lot of helmets, shields, helmets, yeah. It's not a bad piece of pork, but it's got a very earthly taste to it. And I also like these modern knives because I'm thinking to myself, well, I wonder if you could actually convert one of these to a Viking knife. You know, grind the edge, put a nice shape on it. But you could convert that. I converted quite a few, you know, or I wouldn't say modern knives, but certainly knives from the last 50 to 100 years. You do see them with nice handles, and I've converted a few over the years. Yeah, so I bet you'll be a good laugh to camp drink and battle with. Oh, yes. I mean, I'm quite well known in the reenactment world as being a bit of a folk singer. So get me round a campfire. I'll bring out my songbook and sing you a few songs. It's a pity we don't have songs from the actual period. And I mainly sing 18th and 19th century songs because I spent many years reenacting the American Civil War, and you know, I've definitely met guys from Northern Ireland and Ireland that reenact the war. In fact, you got a lovely American museum over there in Northern Ireland, and they got all these amazing historical buildings. But I'll tell you a funny story. And this goes back, I think it'll be, we're looking nearly 30 years, 29 years ago. My society, the ACWS, got invited to go to this. Well, first of all, we was in Southern Ireland and we was doing some battle reenactments in a place called Dunleary. And what always made me laugh about it was that the battleground was like a park, but the park was just full of concrete benches and bins. And literally, you know, like, you know, 2 dozen of them. So, you know, the Confederates and the Union guys were fighting over these concrete benches and seats and bins. And you couldn't really get away with the fact that they was modern. And then you had the battleground where all the publics were watching. And then there was a road. And then next to the road on an embankment was a railway track. Well, I swear to you, and this would only happen in Ireland, the train went past, saw what was going on, and slowed down and stopped. So the people on the train think, what's going on here? And then they see all these guys with muskets going bang and firing and cannons. So the train stopped to watch the battle. And then the battle was over. The train driver carried on. Well, then after that, we spent about a week in Dunleary. We used to go to this bar. I ended up one night extremely drunk, and I woke up on this beach, half from the sea and half from the beach, like, you know, completely drunk out of my mind. And then we kept on getting invited to all these bars. And, you know, and all these Irish guys were saying, yeah, can any of you guys sing? Well, everybody pushed me forward. And before I know it, I had this big round table and all the locals, because I got a very good voice and I could sing probably better in those days than today, because I've definitely abused my lungs over the years. I'll say no more. You know, they just kept on buying me pints of Guinness and whiskey. So I literally got all the Union guys I was with drunk because I was just getting all the beer for free. And then after that, we got invited to the Ulster American theme park, which I really love to go back to. Not been there for 25 years. And they've got all these amazing buildings, all brought back from America and rebuilt. It was like a bank holiday weekend, and it was a Saturday. And at the time, I was a sergeant at the time, so I was in charge of a few men, and I was given my instructions. So, you know, I want, you know, the officer above me say, right, I want you guys to go and stand by this, you know, this picket fence, and when you see the Confederates starting to march down the road, you start firing, and that's the start of the battle. Well, at the same time, in the big square of the buildings. So you go into the also American theme park. You start off in Ireland in 1840s and 50s. They got the cottages, and it comes to a high street which does an L shape. And then at the end, you got these massive double doors, and inside this warehouse, they've got a reconstruction of a ship. And then you go into the ship, and then you come out the ship, and then you're in the next part of the park, which is the American part. You know, and they've got all these cornfields, they've got all these buildings from Pennsylvania, you know, picket fences. And at the same time, in this like square in the street, we had the American ambassador, you know, to Southern Ireland, giving a speech. It was a woman. So I'm there. I got like half a dozen men. We're all in skirmish order, and you know, I was told by my officer. He said, "When the Confederates march down the road, that is when the battle commences." So you know, we're waiting there. You know, as you do, you're having a drink of water out of canteens, because reenacting is hard work and hot work. And oh boy, by the God, you do appreciate water when you're on the march. And suddenly, you know, one of my men shouted, because naturally being a sergeant, I got one of my privates to say, right, you're on guard and you're on guard. You let me know, because I want to sit by this tree and sunbathe a bit, you know, and relax a bit, because I was probably hungover from the night before. And he said, when you see the Confederates, you come over and tell me, and then I'll give the order, fire at will, and you guys all start firing. So as a NCO or a sergeant running around and in control of any number of men, and that could be, you know, 6 or it could be 30, depending on the size of your regiment. You know, I only had a small skirmish party to look after. So the Confederates started walking down. One of the privates, Private Moses, we called him that because he was always preaching at us. Everybody's got a nickname. He said, "Right, the Confederates are marching. You know, Sarge. What? Yeah, all right, guys. You know, load at will, fire at will." But at the same time, the American ambassador, who was a woman, was given the speech. But then the Confederates marched down, and I kind of started the battle halfway through her speech. Well, all the public, like 1,000 people, stopped hearing guns and decided to sod the American ambassador to Ireland and go and actually watch the battle. So she was left with like half a dozen people left, and the battle commenced. And quite luckily, I blame the officer, because that's what you do as a sergeant or a corporal or private. It's the officer's fault. He told me the orders. You know, we followed the orders. He got a big bollocking, and I didn't. So yeah. I'm sorry, that was a long story, but it's one of those many memories I've got. And then on the last day, we had a load of gunpowder left. So, and there was a massive mound. So we decided just to see which regiment could die the best by firing a cannon out, which was a good distance away, to be fair. Then we all died in hilarious ways. Yeah, so that would be very cool to come to Northern Ireland. We'll put that on the list. I've been invited all over the world on this channel, so definitely got something I'm going to do. And then the Nankin69 says, cool hat. Well, this actually used to be a pair of trousers, which used to belong to Turkey, and it's such a lovely wool. And his trousers got a little bit holy around the crotch area and the knee section. So he said, I'm going to throw them away. And I said, well, can I have them to make some hats out of? And I managed to make, you know, about 4 or 5 hats. And then Dine Ken69 said, oh, go on, give us a song. Well, you never know. I might get to the song in a minute. And then he says, do you get paid for doing reenactments? Well, I have done in the past. I mean, in the 90s, I used to get paid to do events, and that's really happened. And then Eggle, as you know, the great and great channel host, had a business, and he used to go around the schools. So I used to sometimes support him and work for Eggle. And yeah, I've definitely been paid, and I've been paid to take part in films and movies as an extra, as a reenactor. I got invited to take part in the Lord of the Ring movies, but I decided at the time, having like 6 months out of your life to go to New Zealand was just too much. You know, I could have ended up being an orc or a high elf or somebody else. And then they had literally thousands of extras. A lot of them were reenactors. So yeah, I kind of wish I did it now. And then King Edward, the turbulent Neil 26 says, have you created any new Viking things lately? No, not really, no. I do some biscuits. I made some Viking biscuits the other day as a trial. They're a bit chewy. I could do some wild seed. But I am working behind the scenes and trying to get myself set up so I can start sewing and I can start making things on camera, because that's always been the long-term aim. But there's always been a little part of me which kind of like feels, well, I don't feel confident enough to make things on camera because, you know, I ever get things wrong. So that's kind of, you know, stopped me from doing it. And the other aspect of it is that I don't have a lot of tools. I've never really had a lot of money as a carer to go and invest in cooking ware. So, you know, if I had a cauldron and the cooking utensils and the ability to have a fire, I would demonstrate cooking for you. And it's something I'm going to have to invest in the future to buy this equipment. But I think it'll be well worth it, because I do have a massive folder which my old friend Thorolf collected of medieval recipes from the 11th, 12th and 13th and 14th centuries. And, you know, we know a little bit about Norse food as well. So, to be honest, I can't really remember what films I took part in, to be fair. And the last bit of filming I did was with a TV series about corporal punishment. And Eggle was playing the prison warden. It was set in Derby Jail. And the guy that was in the series was the late and possibly great Dave Courtney, the ex-gangster. And he was doing a series about corporal punishment because he was a very good friend of Richard Felix, who I'd done a little bit of work with in the past, many years ago. But the only problem with that was he never really paid you much money, and getting money out of him was like getting water out of a stone. So that's the last thing we did. That must have been, and it's on YouTube. If you type in Dave Courtney and Derby Jail, you'll see the hour-long video. And I basically played a 19th century prison guard. But if you ever watch the video, you'll notice that I'm actually wearing an American Civil War uniform. So we had all these extras, you know, who were like the locals coming out, you know. I kept on saying, no, you can't have the body, you know. And you can hear me in the video doing that. And, you know, yeah. So that's the last thing I took part in. I took part in quite a few things as an extra, but some of them were just like TV shows. We did one for Look Out North about the Battle of Fulford. I think I played a dead body in that. And I think I'm maybe seeing Charging. But because it's like 20, 30, 25 years ago, I just don't remember everything. And then we have a comment here from Rob, N771, a very old fan of the channel. Hello, Rob. And he says, Braggy, you crazy fool. Well met, brother. Oh, well met. You have to come up and see us. Or I'll come down to you when I get my car on the road again. And don't forget, Rob, if you want to get out your kit and portray an archer for a few videos, then do let me know. The offer is still there, Rob. So Reznov Hall 9198 says, is your helmet rated for Eastern fighting? You're talking about this one here? Well, you'll probably get away with that with Eastern fighting, I would say. Yeah, I got too many helmets, to be fair. But I'm always wanting more. In fact, I got an helmet to unbox. It's been in the box for about 5 months. But my best helmet, which is somewhere around here, is my Coppergate helmet. Yeah, I literally got I got more helmets than you know I've had hot dinners. But you know, and it makes you think. I was talking to Eric about this earlier. Just think about all the people that have reenacted that have given up, got too old, or found another hobby, and then you know how much reenactment kit is sitting in people's cupboards and attics. I mean, I think there'll be a hell of a lot out there because you know people have been doing it since the 70s and 80s. I was thinking this the other day, and I'd love to know your thoughts. how old is reenacting? You know, not only in the historical sense, but also in the sense of the modern world. Because I think it dates to the 60s, but then again, I think reenactments of battles have probably taken place, you know, all throughout time to a certain degree. Then Resnos, yeah, and I really love to get an Eastern helmet. I don't really have one of those Eastern helmets, you know, with the nice brass work and a nice peak. I really do want to get one of them. And then Resnos Hall says, I was invited to take part in the Woolen Festival battles. Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'm always looking for invitations to go to events and to meet amazing people like yourselves and, you know, do things on camera. So Rob says, one will need a new bow, brother. My current one is too Eastern. I will try to procure a pine bow to be true to Elric. Oh, that'd be cool. It is definitely something I want to have on the channel, and I definitely want to buy a longbow. But I've tried making a couple over the years, but they're not the most easiest thing to do. But there is a company, and I think they're mainly on TikTok, but I swear, I think they're on YouTube, that you can actually do a course for like a couple £100, and you come out with a authentic handmade longbow, which you make over the weekend when you're camping in the wood. So I wouldn't mind doing that. And I won't mind doing the course which the flint napper, Lord, what's his name? Oh, I hate it when I can't remember. The guy who does like Stone Age things. He was on that program to, you know, when Survivor Man, whatever it was. Will Lloyd, I won't mind doing his course on flint napping as well. And then maybe build up a Neolithic Stone Age impression. I've certainly got enough wooden clubs for it. And I'll drink some more beer. We'll eat a bit more meat. And I'm having mustard with it though. It does make you think, you know, did they have mustard? Yeah, well, I think mustard grows wild naturally in the UK. And there's also the plant which tastes like mustard but isn't mustard, which the Germans like. So King Edward says, the Turbulent, do you have any craft places near you? Diana, if not, worth watching YouTube videos. It's good as well to learn to get into pottery. Yeah, I'd really love to learn how to get into pottery. I know I have a friend of mine who's a landowner around here, and the Mennel family. I know Godfrey on his land has some medieval clay pits, and I wouldn't mind trying to get into the clay pits and dig some clay out. And the Mennel family came over in 1066. And the land they're on now was awarded by William the Conqueror in 1086, and they've been there ever since. And they're still pretty much set in that time as well. So yeah, I won't mind trying to get into some more of these crafting videos and also woodland survival as well, and doing a little bit of that, but also adding that Stone Age, or no, so that medieval twist to it, and then kind of go a little bit bigger, but one thing at a time. You know, like how to make fire and how to, you know, craft things. There's a video out tomorrow. You may have seen the short video where I'm riveting a spearhead. Well, that's a 20-minute video. That's from that video. And I'm de-rusting a spearhead in my modern clothes, because I don't want to get rust on my authentic clothes. So that's coming out tomorrow. I've got another wooden club video to do with a bonus ending where I'm using a wood horse on my club for the first time. It's actually coming together now. I was looking at it early in the garden thinking, actually, this is going to be quite a good club. And then I think my next project with wood is going to be a reconstruction from one of my books of an Anglo-Saxon mallet. I'm going to make 2 or 3 of them. I've got some nice willow and some nice hazel. Sew some hats will be another thing. And there's gradually tried to improve my confidence about sewing things and making things on camera. Because at one point, many years ago, I was an Etsy seller. I used to make items, hats and all sorts, but it kind of took over my life. And I was also on eBay as a reseller. And before I knew it, my life consisted of packing parcels, listing items, and finding items to sell. And oh boy, I wish back then I knew about dumpster diving. And I am a bit of a dumpster diver, and I might make a few videos on that from the modern perspective of what I do behind the scenes, and take you to some of the places where you can find amazing things. I found some amazing things dumpster diving, including some Viking age reconstructed things, like a little scythe I found, and some nice little skillets. So, which will be fine for this period of history, which really did amaze me. But I also found like World War II medals in bins and gold and silver. It's amazing what people throw away. So I might film a few of them. But again, I got to think about what camera I use as well. So Rob says the English use U, the Norse use pi. Disposable but easier to make. Yeah, that's quite fascinating that they did use pi. And I know they use pine because pine in Scandinavia grows a lot slower. So therefore, the grain and the graining on Scandinavian pine, and especially if you go further up north, is the growth rings are slower. Therefore, it makes a better bow. And I was reading that in one of the many books I've got, and I thought that was quite fascinating. I'm also doing some research to do a very long video on shield, but from the authentic point of view and not from the reenactment point of view, which this is a reenactment shield. And I went to an event last year. I saw the Vikings of Middle England, and I got talking to Jason from Wayland Forge. I know Irix just bought a knife from him, a sax. So looking forward to seeing that being reviewed. Iric is a very clever man when it comes to sheaths and scabbards. And so I'm looking at probably trying to get back into reenactment side of things. And I know there's a local group from the Viking Society themselves who I spoke to last year, but I wasn't really ready to join up and get back into it last year. So when I got my car back in the road, but my car's off the road at the moment because I just can't afford to run it. Which, shockingly, I'm going to start going along to some training events. But the only downside about that, and I've probably been a bit silly, is I'm thinking, well, I'm going to come along, and then, do I tell them that I've got a big YouTube channel talking about this history, or do I keep it secret and hope that nobody recognises me? Because, because I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I do make mistakes. I put my hand up to that because that's how you learn. You learn from your mistakes when it comes to history, and then you learn, actually, this is the right way, this is what they did, this is what they didn't do. So I got a little bit of reluctance to join a group with them thinking and finding out that, oh, he's a big, well, I won't say I'm a massive YouTuber, 13,000 subscribers is quite big. I think we're going to be about 20,000 by the end of the year if I keep putting out the content the way I do and I don't burn myself out for a few months, which I've done quite a few times. And the only reason why I'm putting out so many videos a day is because I've got so many videos to publish. I've got more videos than what I've got time to publish. So that's why you're getting, on a good day, you'll be getting about 9 videos because I've just got too much content. And I like to think it's all quality. I do try to vet it. I've stopped using CapCut or making those sort of silly videos. But, in the last, 6 weeks, I've probably filmed 300 to 400 videos I've got to go through. And, of course, when you're not, filming, you're editing. When you're not editing, you're answering comments, you're pinning comments. And I'm doing the SEO on the titles because, AI is better than the titles, but what I do, I always do a two-way critical test on everything, and I try to analyze and get the best result. But it is, it is a hit and miss. So King Edward says, "You say if I'm lucky, I can find metal in the streets when I'm out and about, like silver and gold jewelry and steel and iron metal pieces that will be useful when I start blacksmithing." Yeah, I mean, I have recently, last year, I got a portable 19th century forge. It's an old forge from when they used to make ships and the wooden sailing ships. But I also got two proper big forges, which somehow I'm going to need to get a van, hire it, and bring them back. And I got the most biggest anvil you'll ever seen in your life. I mean, God knows I'm going to get that in my car. So that, again, I want to try to get into the blacksmithing because I got quite a few things I want to make. I was out the other day and I found a big car spring, the coil. Whenever I find them, I think, yeah, that's wow. I get excited because it's spring steel and I know how good they are for knives. So yeah, I've made a lot of knives, I've made a lot of axes, I've made a couple of swords. I've got probably the most biggest lance axe you'll ever seen in blade form. It's massively too big because when I gave the design to the guy that was put it onto a laser cutting machine, they got the dimensions wrong, and I've ended up with the world's biggest lance axe. It's like that wide and that long, and I've never done nothing with it. So yeah, I've made a lot over the years. I've made a lot of the clothes I wear. I mean, I think the under tunic I've made, the hat I've made, the cloak I've made. This I got made on camp. Literally, you know the Arab guy that sells material, and one of the nicest traders you'll ever meet, Ali, his name is. I got this on a training weekend. He was there trading, got some very nice wool. And then one of the local women, who makes kit, made it overnight. And the next day, I had a brand new tunic. And this was the first tunic I bought in 1999 or 2000. I think it was 99. I thought to be reenacted. It's very colourful blue, I must say, very rich. So over the years, I've made a lot of things. I've got to make a cloak for Sam from Texas because he sent me some arrowheads and a javelin head and made a little flint arrow. And so, that was a part of the deal. He was going to make me these items. And he actually did it on a live stream. So the live stream's on his channel where he's making the items. And his company is called Dire Wolf Forge. So if you're American and he wants something making, I recommend Sam. He showed me a picture earlier and he's made a miniature crossbow. And the crossbow literally sits on your hand. And I think to myself, wow. So there's amazing people out there with amazing skills. And, those are one of the things I want to bring to the channel. Go to meet a few blacksmiths, buy, order a knife and actually film them, make the knife, and then talk about it. Like Hector Cole, I'd love to meet him, and some of the other infamous characters like Paul Binns, who I've not met for many years, but I got quite a few of his blades. I don't even know whether Paul Binns, I don't know whether you guys know this, is he still going as a sword manufacturer? Because I did try the other day to find his website and I couldn't find it. And then Rob says, brother, you have enough contacts to make an indie movie. Should you need a archer and a long blade fighter, I'm in. Boy, actually, that would be something quite amazing to do. And I'd actually, not edit it myself. I'd actually put that out to somebody to make and edit. We'll do the filming. And we'll film like a independent film. Oh yeah, I'll be up for that. Yeah, I think that'll be amazing. So we have a comment here from King of Age fans, Aga fans, fans. So I need to get glasses. So, what are your thoughts on the show Viking? Well, it's a great show. Let's face it. I mean, it's brought about Viking history. A lot of people are fans of that show. I meet people all the time say, "Oh, I love the Vikings TV show and The Last Kingdom," but they do get a lot of things right. They don't look like me, do they? I made a video about this earlier, how Hollywood represents and portrays the medieval world, and it's all browns and leather and more leather and leather trousers and leather armor, and it's all very Hollywoody. And it'll be really nice that one day they actually film an authentic TV series. And there's a very good film made many years ago called Beowulf, and that is really authentic, and the fight scenes are amazing. And I really want to. I've got it downloaded. I'm going to see if I could do a reaction video to the fight scenes and get away with the copyright under fair use. So it'll be really nice to see an authentic program. But what we've got to celebrate about such programs of the Vikings, and especially the Last Kingdom, which I think is in some ways it's better, in some ways it's not. It brings about the knowledge, and it talks about the Viking Age. So people, this is one of the reasons why I often use the word Viking instead of Norse, even though now I'm trying to get in my head to use the term Norse more. But as a content creator and from a search engine optimization point of view, well, if you type in Viking into the vidIQ search box to see the results, through the roof. But Norse doesn't get so many views. So you meet people, and if you say you're a Norseman, they say you're a Northman, a Norseman, a Viking. So a lot of people don't understand what the term Norse means. So that's why I tended to use the word Viking. And in fact, there's a video out tonight. It'll be out now, where I made a reply video to a TikTok comment where they said, "Yeah, I'm not a Viking, So I kind of made a reaction video to that, talking about the fact that we know within the context of the Anglo-Saxon times and the Norse culture, it is written and people were called Vikings, either on an individual basis or as a group. So the term Viking was certainly used, and Viking, or to go Vikingar, if you want to be more accurate, it's Viking or Vikingar is the correct way of saying it. And I think whenever you're mentioning the Norse language or Anglo-Saxon, when you put a bit of emphasis on the words, it really does sound really good. And this is why I think you're going to be very impressed with my Ragnar Lothbrok video, which I'm going to get out at the weekend. I think it's one of the best videos I've actually made. And I shared it to Eirik, and he said, "Bloody awesome." So, yeah. So, Rob says, "I need to step out. I'm up at 5. Be well, brother." Oh, be well indeed. I was up at 10:30 this morning, but by the time I settled down, it was 1 o'clock last night. And then I've been filming for 2 days, and I've not managed to have a bath because I've got no working showers, because I need to get my showers working, but they're not working. I need to get them working. So for the last year, I've been having baths, and it's been wonderful. I love a bath. But for 2 days, I've not had a bath, and I could tell that I've been wearing my kit. And I think to myself last night, when you go to bed and you know that you need to shave and to have a bath to be clean again. So I kept on waiting for my hot water to come on. It came on in the end, and then I went to sleep. But then I had a weird dream last night that I was in the medieval times, and the world was being invaded by aliens, and all these UFOs were landing, and all the Vikings were fighting them. And I thought, how surreal is that? What is that reflecting on my own self? Apart from the fact that I live and breathe Vikings and medieval life a lot. I mean, this whole room I'm in is my medieval Viking room, and that's the only purpose it has in my house. It used to be upstairs in the old bedroom. So, some days I think to myself, and this is my potential girlfriend's fault. She kind of suggested that when the Viking room was in, I got a very large bedroom. It's bigger than most people's houses. And that was where me and Eggle filmed. But then she had this crazy idea about rearranging the house and bringing the Viking room downstairs, which makes sense because then I can get straight in my kit and go straight outside. Because when you got swords and langsaxes and you're trying to walk around a house, it's not easy. Some days you have to walk sideways to get down. There's got a corridor up there. So walking around a house with all this gear on, and you're going from upstairs to outside to upstairs again, was a bit of a problem. So even though this room is smaller and this is a new setup I've made, because I used to have my cupboard here with all my Viking clothes in. Now that's all on a clothes rail for easy access. So I haven't got to think about getting something out of the cupboard and putting all my piles of clothes out. So this is a new development. I'm still working at it. And then I'm planning to do kind of a vlog series again. And I've got another filming area there next to my nice gas stove. So yeah, so it's it's all about developing the channel, trying to do more content. I think by the end of the year we'll have probably 5,000 videos published. We're currently on, I think it's 3,853, I think. If I last remembered, that may be a few out of date by now. I mean, and it does make you think, what percentage of YouTube channels, and you see channels a bit like me, a bit like Alex the History Guy, amazing channel, top quality content, but he puts out probably one video a month, or maybe once a week, and it's what you call hero content, where you specialize in making one big massive video. And a lot of the locations he goes to, I just not have the ability to do that. So so there's not many channels with the amount of content we have. So King Edward says, the problem with modern day technology is that it's taken away the ability for people to learn how to make things and to be able to repair them instead of buying something new, especially for survival. Well, yes, I think that's part of the story, but I think the other part of the story is how the business model has changed when it comes to manufacturing. Because in the old days, they made you a knife and it would last you your life, to the point where it's probably massively ground away, or whatever modern thing you want to think about, they made things to last. So you go and buy a frying pan, cast iron. I mean, let's face it, a cast iron frying pan will last you all your life, and then will carry on to somebody else's life. But they changed the business model so that things break, and so that they make it out of plastic. Plastic doesn't last forever, because they want you to buy something, it breaks in a year's time, and buy the thing again, because that's how they get you, and that is how they make money. And it's a shame that's happened in the world. But yeah, so, and the technology doesn't really help. On the one hand, it can teach you a lot of things. I mean, there's a lovely channel from Ireland called Danu's Herb Garden, who I watch. She looks just like my neighbour Maureen. And that's an amazing channel teaching you about plants and herbs and growing things in the garden. So from technology, you can learn a lot of things, but the best way to learn anything is in person. So for instance, recently I invited a fan of the channel, a subscriber called Daniel, to come on the channel. He's my best friend's son. And he's 6'8" and probably one of the most strongest 18-year-olds I've ever met. And I'm teaching him how to use a spear and how to use a sword. Now I'm a little bit rusty because I've not taught anybody for probably 15 years when it comes to this period of history. But you don't forget how to use a sword, and you don't forget how to be safe and how to teach somebody, because once you learn that ability, it's fundamentally learnt as a learnt memory. So I'm teaching Daniel, who's massive and really strong, and I'm like, thinking, oh God, don't hurt me, Daniel. I'm wearing my mail. I'm going to wear every bit of armour. But if I try to teach somebody how to use a sword through a video, it's not the same, is it? I mean, you can learn a bit about the technique. You can see what I'm doing, but unless I've got somebody to fight and train, it doesn't fundamentally, it's not easy to teach somebody online how to use a sword and a spear. You've got to do it in person, and that is by far the best way to learn. It's like, for instance, you want to learn how to use a flint and steel, or how to make a fire using the bow. Yeah, you can watch a lot of videos, and there's amazing content out there. I used to know a guy called Dave, who had a workshop I had, and that's what he does for a living. He's been on the One Show and all over TV. And he teaches woodland survival to big corporations, and probably charges £500 a head and does 10 people a day, 3 days a week. I mean, you count the money, that's a lot of money. So, but you can't teach the same person through the camera. You can learn, you can watch, but doing it in person is the best way to learn. So we'll just go to your comments. So we've got a comment here from Alexander Pikes. So hello, I don't think I've seen your name before, and a very warm welcome to the channel. And it says, doesn't Vikings like Harold Hardrada had specific weapon styles? Well, yes, there may have been certain specific styles of fighting. I think that would be, a thing back in the day. And of course, we don't fight in the same style as a reenactor because I don't want to hurt somebody, and B, we're fundamentally as reenactors, when you're fighting, apart from when you're training, you're doing it in front of the public. You're there to put a show on. So reenactment fighting is a little bit Hollywoody. There's that guy on YouTube called Roland. He's got a Polish or Slavic kind of a last name. I can never remember his last name, but he's done some amazing videos about the way the Vikings and the Norse would have fought. It's like when you see two people in the reenactment world, we fight facing forward, and it's all about the sword play and trying to get that blow in. But in the Viking times, it's about sidestepping and then getting your blow into the shoulder, or the neck, or the back to take them out of the fight. And I watched another very good video earlier with two guys, and it's only 2 minutes long, were fighting and demonstrating the different styles of fighting with a knife. You attack, you then grab their hand and then manipulate their hand, and then you get in to undercut their belly, for instance. And that was quite fascinating, and I'd love to do something like that as well. But I'm a little bit rusty when it comes to fighting, because I didn't really do a lot with Egil, because Egil was getting to the point where he didn't really want to fight too much. So I'm hungry. I can beer as well. So it'd be something I'd like to get back into, which is one of the reasons why I would like to probably rejoin the group. If I don't do it this year, I'm definitely going to do it this next year. But I'm hoping that everything's going to work out in my life this year, and wish me luck. And that I can actually go along, go to some events, meet a lot of people, and just try to get back more into the hobby and eat a lot of the food and drink mead. And I think it's quite fascinating when you think about, Harold Hardrada. I think we can tell a little story here about Harold Hardrada and why being stubborn can sometimes cost you your life. So, we've had the Battle of Fulford, and then next came along the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Now, the Norse, the Vikings, weren't expecting a fight. They were sunbathing, they were swimming and washing themselves in the river. They had their tunics off and they was relaxing. And there was Norsemen on both sides of the river. The next thing they saw was King Harold and his army marching. Whether it's in column or in line, I don't know. But they saw them marching towards the bridge. They was not ready. That was a big mistake. And so, the men that were on the far side of the bridge were rushing to get over to the other side to grab the weapons to form a shield wall. And this is where the famous story of the lone warrior with the Dane axe on the bridge. Because he stood there, he stood his ground to slow down the Saxons. The Saxons kept on sending men after men. At first they sent one man. The Dane axeman quickly took him out with one blow. They sent another man. Oh, send somebody a bit better. All right, you can go. And then they sent 2 men and 3 men. And before you know it, he's probably killed 30 men. Then the Saxons realised that this man was a mighty warrior. A very tough man. A good fighter. They offered him terms. They said, we will let you walk away from the bridge. You give us the bridge, you can have your life. Because that was respect. They respected him because they knew how good a fighter he was. But again, he was probably a little bit stubborn, and he was still trying to slow down the Saxons from crossing the bridge to give his friends, his kin, chance to form up a shield wall. And again, the Saxons sent more men, and in the end, it took a Saxon, and some say that he found a barrel, and he got in a barrel and put it in this river, the River Derwent, and rowed down somehow to the bridge. Some say it's a small boat, and that we'll never know. But he had a spear, and because bridges in those days may not be like solid construction, so there'd be gaps in the planks. He got under the bridge and got his spear and garroted him from below into his groin. And that brave, famous warrior, who remains nameless, and it's a shame that we don't have his name, became a man of legend. But at the same time, King Harold Hardrada was gathering his men up. There was a small hillock in the distance, and he gathered all his men, and the men formed like a circle because they knew they was going to be surrounded. They was outnumbered, probably 2 to 1. And, you know, the Saxons came over, King Harold, and of course, King Harold Hardrada had Tostig as well. I think that was King Harold's brother-in-law, I think. I forget. I know he was one of the Godwin sons. And so King Harold Hardrada stood firm on this ground, on this hillock. But what he should have done, because 20 miles away is it Viking, they had the fleet, an awful lot of ships, hundreds and hundreds of them, and there was 3,000 Norsemen. And of course, because they weren't expecting the fight, the men that were on the hillock have left all the chainmail and the helmets behind, so they were very lightly armoured, just like me, in tunics. And the Saxons surrounded them, and they fought a bitter death. And the next thing, arrows were flying and javelins were firing. King Harold Hardrada took an arrow to the neck and died. Tostig took over. He phoned up the men and they tried to fight. They've already sent somebody to go to the coast to bring back all of the other Vikings. They had 20 miles to march in a few hours with weapons and chainmail. But it was too late. By the time they got there, most of the Vikings on the hillock were dead. And this demonstrates and teaches a very important lesson about stubbornness, because it was fundamentally stubbornness that cost King Harold Hardrada his life and lost him the battle. And of course, the rest of history is set from that. For at the same time, William, the bastard, proper bastard, he was preparing his men in Normandy and he was sailing over. King Harold found out about this and quickly had to march all the way down to Hastings. And we know what happened next. The Saxons lost. And it does make me think, what if they made peace with King Harold Hardrada? History would change if both of those armies got together and fought William. But that did not happen. So stubbornness, and to be stubborn can cost you your life. And I'm a little bit stubborn, but I do remember whenever I'm stubborn, I always think of King Harold Hardrada, and there are many instances throughout, life where, in historical context, people's stubbornness has cost them. And I have done that as a long video for the channel, which shall be published in the future, because I think it's a fantastic story. And I've got a lot of really nice historical stories like that to tell, because, we all love our weapons, but it's not all about the weapons, is it? We started the channel as a channel to tell folk tales and to tell stories. And that still is our purpose, because what I wanted to do with Northworthy was to create this massive database of videos of all the stories from the sagas, or the stories from fables, or the folk tales, because some of these folk tales go back an awful long time, a bit like the gingerbread man story. I mean, that is said to go back to the Iron Age at least, and probably further, because a lot of these stories would be handed down from one generation to another. If you're a storyteller, you'll start as an apprentice. You'll be taught by another storyteller, and then you have to learn all these long and complicated stories. And trust me, especially in the sagas, some of these stories, like Egil's saga, the saga of Njál, they're very long and got a lot of names and places you need to remember. So it also demonstrates that these storytellers, these Scots, these scolds, were and I had brilliant accounts of stories, and we lost so many of these stories. I mean, luckily, Snorri Sturluson, did save a lot of these stories, but a lot of them have been lost. And I'm hoping one day, maybe in Iceland or in the mountains of Norway, when the ice is retreating, they may find more manuscripts, because that would be wonderful to get some of the missing stories from the sagas, because there are no doubt missing stories about Thor, missing stories about Odin or Woden, and these are the stories that we must try to find, and we may never. Have you got any more questions, any more comments? I'll have some more beer. Yes, I did this quite a bit in the past, where I used to do these long 5 or 6 hour live streams, and you'll see me drink 4 or 5 pints, and I'll tell stories and fables. And I do know many, many. It's amazing. Once I've told them, I generally remember them. I'll put a bit more on this in here. This is where it's too full when I've got to get my mouth to the beer without spilling it. It's a pint of Shipyard Pale Ale and some Stella. I'm going English and continental with my beer tonight. And I'm very lucky in Derby, where I live. My local pub goes back to 1160, when it used to be part of the Darley Abbey Monastery. And luckily, my best friend's half-dam's parents run this pub, and it's like a second home. You go there, it's got a big fireplace and all the stonework and all the history. And we are lucky to have such places. So King Edward says, are you planning on making your own Viking mead or ale in the future? Yeah, I might think about doing that. I've got quite a few big tubs of honey from like the 1980s. So I might have a think. I definitely got some recipes within my collection of how to make mead. I've never made beer before, so we could do that on the channel. Because when we, beer is such an old thing, ever since they learnt how to, get your crops and so forth. It's a very old tradition, and this is partly why probably in Europe we've got such a deep drinking culture, because it's generic. It's been around since we've learnt how to stop being nomads and farm the land. Because when we started to farm the land to plant the seeds, to grow the wheat and the barley, we learnt the ability on how to brew and make beer. And of course, if you're living 1,200 years ago in Dialaby, 3 miles down the road, the local springs and the water sources would not be clean. So you either had to boil your water or brew your water into beer. And so all the time people will be brewing. This is where we get the term your light ale, your medium ale, and your top of the table, your strong ale. The strong ale is there for your guests. So, for instance, if I had a long house down my garden, and I might think about building one, and you came to my door, and knocked on my door, and I think, oh, this is a important person. Oh, I'm going to get out the fine ale for you. you know, and the nice cuts of meat, which is my tea tonight. Oh boy, I wish I had some cheese. So hospitality was such an important thing. It's not well, apart from, you know, the story about Hengist and Horsa when they was working for King Vortigern and invited over, and they came over in their longships, and they saw the opportunity to take power, and so, you know, they got all together in this big long hall, and when one of them spoke these certain words, which I forget, they all got out the knives and killed all the Saxons that were in the hall, and then they took, was it Kent or East Anglia? I think it was East Anglia. And so I often compare that to the Game of Thrones and the Bloody Wedding, because as a Norse person, you don't invite people to your house and butcher them, because that's really bad hospitality. But it's quite interesting with the story of Hengist and Horsa, and Hengist means, I think it means stallion, and Horsa means horse. I think that's fascinating with itself. And that's another story I very recently told a few months back but I've not published a video yet. So I think it's fascinating, really. But so of course it will be a bad thing. It will be deemed as not very honourable to butcher people in your longhouse. But at the same time, people have always been greedy and people have always wanted power. And when you got a weak king and you got weak Earls and Saxons with him, and the magnificent fellows, Hengist and Horsa, I can never remember which one died. I think Hengist died and Horsa lived. Or was it Horsa lived and Hengist died? So, you know, apart from that time, but there's been other occasions in history when that's happened again, because, you know, such things happen because people get greedy and people want power. And, you know, if you're strong, you've got strong men, and you see the opportunity to seize a kingdom, to kill a king, to kill his men, then you're going to do it, aren't you, in those times? Because that's what makes you legends. That's your word fame. And when you think about King Vortigern and you think about Hengist and Horsa, who's the most famous of those two groups of people? Well, Hengist and Horsa are probably by far more famous. Not many people have heard of King Vortigern. If that's, I know it begins with a V. I often get things mixed up. So, you know, history is such an important thing. That was their word fame. They went down in legend, and of course, you know, they seized that kingdom and ruled it for a while, but then somebody else came along and wanted it, and that is always the way. This is partly one of the reasons why the Norse came to England, because, you know, they wanted the power, but it also about the fact that, you know, Scandinavia had a population problem. So if you look at Norway, for instance, most people in that time in the kingdoms were on the coast, because not many people want to live in the mountains. Only bandits, robbers, and people that didn't want to be ruled lived in the mountains of Norway. It was a very tough life. So that's why all the kingdoms of Norway were on the edge, on the coastline and the fjords. But because of the population problem, because, you know, families in those days, you know, if I was a Norwegian, you know, chieftain or somebody from Norway back in the 8th, 9th century, I may end up having 20, 30 children. That is very well accounted for in history. Because let's face it, you know, you haven't got much to do in your longhouse, and you've got a wife, you're going to be busy for a while. And then, you know, when she becomes barren, you probably start her off and get another wife and have more children into your 40s and 50s. And if you got to that age, you was an older and very highly respected, because, you know, most people did not reach that age. So let's just go to some more of your comments. So Landegar 5491, like your videos a lot. Best greetings from Germany. Oh, great. Thank you very much. It's a fantastic country, Germany. I went over and we did a battle reenactment there for the British Army in Paderborn. And I wish I knew at the time, because I think in Paderborn they've got a nice museum. And I never heard about it at the time. There's some really nice medieval manuscripts, if I'm correct. So And then he says, are you active on markets? As in, do I make things? Well, no, I used to make things for people. But, you know, I never really liked doing it as a business or making things to order because I'm just too scatty-brained for that. But I do make things for gifts now and again. And I will be making more things on the channel and trying to get more into the crafting side of things and reminding myself that I do have the ability to make things because, you know, I can pretty much make anything because my work background is an engineer when I worked for Rolls-Royce and, you know, excellent, amazing engineering. So it would be nice to bring that back to the channel and, you know, maybe either have stuff produced and sell it through the channel, but things that are authentic. There's too many traders and manufacturers and people that sell medieval things and the quality is just not good enough. And a lot of these things are made in India and China. So, and I do have contacts in India that have made things for me. So whether I go down that route in the future, but if I ever did go down that route, I'm only going to accept and sell things that are bang on authentic to the highest quality. Because, you know, manufacturing things in the UK has become very expensive because of the energy price. So I'm going to take my lang sacks out. It does make you think, you know, I'm being very naughty because as a Norse person, you don't carry your weapons in your house. And I've got a bad neck at the moment from wearing not this helmet, but I got another one very similar. And oh boy, it's heavy on your neck. Yeah, so, you know, we do have a lot of videos. We've got a lot of decent long form videos. We've got too many playlists because I need to redo again. I'm currently going back, you know, all the way to the beginning on the channel, and I'm redoing the descriptions and rewriting the titles and redoing the thumbnails and going back to the original video, and I'm making the thumbnails. So you will see over time the thumbnails improve because that was one of the most, you know, making a thumbnail, this is the picture you see, is such a complicated thing. It really is. I mean, I must have spent half an hour on one short video making a thumbnail today. I mean, if you're trying to do that for a living, you're never going to make a living out of it, are you? But when you do make a living out of YouTube, it's amazing, the opportunity. But this is about legacy. This is about word fame. Because one of the reasons why I started this channel was I asked myself the question, as a modern Norse pagan, how do I get into Valhalla? Because I can't die in the battlefield, you know. So I asked myself this question and I thought about it and I meditated on it, I pondered on it, you know. I was lying in bed thinking about it in 2015 and 2016 and way back in the past. But it wasn't really until 2015 and 16 that I was thinking about this channel and I had this concept because I was already, you know, I started off in 2009. I had a big music channel where I was just downloading music videos and putting them on YouTube, you know, way before the copyright issues came in. And then, you know, copyright came in and I just deleted that channel because I was going to, it would have been deleted anyway because the fact that I was copying and pasting music videos from the internet and putting them on YouTube. And it was like 16 years ago, and no matter how many times I tried to think of the name of the channel I had, you know, well, 17 years ago, I can't remember it. And then about 2013 or 14, I started a gaming channel because I've always been a bit of a gamer. I love to play the Xbox when I got time. Not at the moment, I'm too busy. But, you know, Call of Duty, I used to belong to two clans. One was called the Dirty Tubing Bastards because, you know, various names. If you know Call of Duty, you know what I'm talking to. And then we had another clan, which I can't tell you the name because it's rather offensive, and that was called the FUG. And I think it's still going. So I used to play a lot of Call of Duty, and every night I get home from work and, you know, on the Xbox, you know, back in the old days, you know, and I used to be a PlayStation person, but I left PlayStation for the Xbox. And then I used to love playing Call of Duty and have all my friends on the headset and friends all over the world. And so I decided to start a gaming channel. I did a lot of content on Call of Duty and Fallout 4. I made a lot of videos on that, and that led to other games, and got into Minecraft because I'm very creative. In fact, I've got a very old survival world on Minecraft, and it's now 14 years old. I've been playing on it. I mean, that's an awful lot of time I've played. And I'm a part of a very elite number of people that have a very old world, which, oh, look, my tripod decided to go funny. That's Loki's fault. Oh, damn you, Loki, moving my tripod. So, yeah, so I started this gaming channel, and I wasn't speaking on it at first. I just made a lot of videos and of gameplay, put it to music, quick edit, job done. But then one day I decided that, and at the time, one of the people that inspired me to start this channel was my friend Thorolf. And this is Thorolf's Langsax, for instance. And I've got quite a lot of his kit he gave me, his medieval kit. Why is it when you get to this time in a live stream, it always... Every time, it's Loki's fault. Damn you, Loki! Disconnecting the live stream. So at the time, you know, my friend Thorolf was watching my videos, and he got very ill. He had cancer. So I started putting out more videos, and I was sending to him, you know, and some would be half an hour long, and he'll watch them. And then one day I decided that, oh, I quite fancy doing a video where I talk. I know I've often told this story a few times on the channel, where I had my first video and I've talked on it. You know, I'm thinking, oh, great, you know, first video talked on YouTube, you know, because I grew up, I didn't talk till I was 4.5 years old. So I had a, you know, speech therapy because I talk too fast, and B, I can't pronounce my R's and W's very well. I have tried hard to get that better, but I do have, you know, Jonathan Ross syndrome. I think I got a little bit better at that. So I was always very, very conscious of the fact of the way I taught. And because I've also got a thick Derbyshire accent, Derbyshire is the county I come from. I love my county. You know, every time I go away and I drive back and I see the sign Derbyshire, I do this every time. I always go, yeah! And I literally every, especially from a reenactment. So, you know, you go away, and as soon as I get back in my own county, oh, it's like being at home. So I decided, you know, to talk on camera, and so I did this video. And so I'm thinking, you know, oh, this video is funny because I listen to myself and I know I'm funny. Because I often think to myself, I should be a Viking comedian and go on stage, you know, perhaps talk to a few comedians and have a go. I love to do that. And so I thought to myself, yeah, you know, so I made this video. I talked on the camera, and, you know, I woke up the next morning thinking, oh, I wonder what kind of reaction I'm going to get. And I saw one comment, and it was a hate comment. And the guy, I remember it vividly to this day. And the guy said, I've watched 1 minute of your video and I hate you already. So I left a nice comment. Oh, you know, welcome to the channel. You know, you don't have to be like that. Oh, I can't remember what I said. It's probably still active on that video. But in my life, I adapt by always seeking the positive out of the negative. So I gave him a warm welcome, which is what I continue doing on the channel. And, you know, my friend Thorolf listened to it. He said, oh, that's a funny video that was. You know, you're really funny on camera, on talking. So I made more videos where I taught, and more. You know, I made a whole game series where I taught. And I used to edit them on my old PC back in the day, when editing was quite basic, you know. And I'll be listening. This happens to me to this day, where I'm listening to a video, especially with one with Eggle, and I'm listening, and I've had to stop because I'm laughing so much at my own comedy, legendary nature. So I continued to make more videos. I taught more. And then my friend Thorolf got cancer, like I said, and he survived it. So I kept on making videos because it gave him a bit of distraction. But all in the back of my mind, because I'm not really active as a Viking for a while, but I love my Norse and Viking Saxon history. I saw some space on YouTube for what we're doing, dressing up in our gear, telling the stories. I decided to start Northworthy. So it was fundamentally Thorolf and Tirkir, and I invited Tirkir to come on and do a load of tales, and he did, and they're excellent. I'd love to actually record them all in 4K now in a new version. And I very recently, I'm going through a lot of our old videos, and I'm editing the beginning, because in the old days, we'll come on the channel, it'd be like this. Oh, good day to you, and welcome to Northworthy Sagas and Stories. I am your host for the day. I am Braggy, and yes, I am a Scot. I am a Scold, and I am a teller of tales. Now, don't forget, folks, to go and click the notification bell and leave us a comment, and check us out on Reddit, or read it, and Facebook. So we used to do that at the beginning of our old videos, but that's dead space. Back in those days in 2017, I had no idea what a hook was, and I'm hoping I'm getting better at hooking my videos at the beginning. You never stop learning as a content creator, and the day you stop learning is the day you fundamentally die, isn't it? So, and I think I've definitely improved that, partly with help with AI, because I think AI helps me to create a better hook. But I know a lot of people don't like artificial intelligence, and I've got a lot of videos which I've recorded last year where I'm chatting with my artificial intelligence, and I'm talking about history. And I put one out a few weeks back where we talked about the Megan film, and I'm a little bit like that. Should I publish him? Should I not publish him on the channel? Would it alienate people? I mean, I did a very good video edited last week where I'm talking about my Coppergate helmet with AI, and AI can be quite useful at giving you information. And some days you have to correct it as well, but that's a whole different story. And I don't know whether to publish all these videos. I probably will. It'll have to be soon, because they're going to get outdated, because I think artificial intelligence is a fascinating thing, potentially very dangerous, potentially very useful for humanity and society, but it's only going to be it's only going to be useful if the right people use it, and the people that are bad don't use it for bad things. Well, that's a whole entire story. I mean, it makes you think what our ancestors will make of it. They'll be, it'll go over their heads, wouldn't it? So, I thought about it so much. But let's go back to your comment. So King Edward says, Crimson Desert is a good game that is out now. Yes, I've heard that. And then we have a comment here from, give me a minute, some Milo Makovic 4435 says, hello, thank you for so many useful infos on your channel. And he says, cheers. Well, cheers, my friend. A very warm welcome, Milo, to the channel. I really do mean that. Every time I say that in a comment or a video, I mean it from the bottom of my heart, because it's your channel equally as much as mine. I'm not going to give you the revenue, not that I'll make any. YouTube make money out of me, but I'm still 1,200 hours away in my watch time. So the best thing, please guys, one thing you could do for me is watch the long form, just to get the hours up, because I spent tens of thousands of hours on this channel, and I'm in a bit of a lucky situation. The money aspect won't change my life, because fundamentally, I don't really need it in the long run. So for me, it's about legacy, and it's about my word fame, and it's about invading YouTube. I know I started talking about this quite a while ago. The number one reason why I started the channel was because I asked myself the question, well, how do I get into Valhalla? and I'm fairly certain I could raise, 100 long ships with 1,000 people, because I'm sure every one of you guys would put your hand up straight away if I said, right guys, I've got 1,000 long ships, should we go and raise somewhere? In the modern concept of the world, that would not go down very well. But I know so many people are thirsty for history, they're thirsty for heritage, and they want to know about their past and who their great many great granddad was. So, heritage is such an important thing, and something I really need to get a little bit more into, and get more into the heritage side of things, because so many guys, especially guys in their 20s and their 30s, feel a little bit lost in the world. I mean, I'm old. I'm 50 this year. Even though on a psychological basis, I've decided to rebrand myself to being 39, especially on dating sites. But in the past, not that I'm on a dating site, because technically I don't know my situation when it comes to I don't know what my status is when it comes to relationship status, because I met this wonderful girl in 2023, and we fell in love so quickly and decided the rest of our lives, and my life has got in the way, and her health has got in the way, and I can't really talk about it anymore, because if she watches this video, she'll be telling me off if she wanted to speak to me. So I can't, on the one hand, I am a single person, and on the other hand, and I'm sure some of you guys may understand this, I am emotionally not single, but physically I'm single. And I don't really want to go too much more into detail, because I respect my potential girlfriend, and she's a very private person. But for somebody with my sort of neurology and the way my brain thinks, I find that to be extremely difficult. And it's been difficult for the last 12 months, to the point it's, I won't say it's heartbreaking, but it's challenging when you don't know your status. And there's a part of me thinks, oh, I should just move on with my life. And there's another part of me, my stubbornness, which is saying, well, I need to see this through one way or another, but at the same time, give it a time scale. I know last year I made a short video where I asked all you guys for advice on my situation, and I kind of got in trouble with my potential girlfriend with that. So that's been really challenging over the last 12 months, and that's not the only challenge I've been dealing with. And one day I am going to do a very open and honest video about the last 3 or 4 years of my life and what I've been through, because a lot of people in my situation will not survive. They would have given up. But because I'm very what's the word, because I can adapt, because I've got such a clever brain. I mean, I'm super intelligent. I mean, I've got what you classed as Einstein syndrome, but in the UK, we don't recognise that as a recognisable syndrome, because, I am super smart. I do daft things, don't get me wrong. I can be as daft as a brush on a good day, and I've made so many daft mistakes in my life, but that is how we learn. And if my dad was here sitting next to me, he'll say, well, if you've not made a mistake in your life, you have never done anything. And another wise saying my dad would say, well, you're only as good as your last job. I'm only as good as my last video. But, oh boy, I've got a great video out tomorrow, and I can't wait for you guys to see my video of the tale of Ragnar Lothbrok and how he had the last laugh. Oh, yes. And the young pigs, his son, how they got his revenge. So it's so if you can watch, if you're watching this still in the re-watching of this video and you got to the 2 hours, well, may I just say to you right now that you're absolutely amazing to watch 2 hours of this video, because I don't have a structure. What I like to do in my live streams, but I will try to plan them a little bit more in the future with sewing and repairing and maintaining kit, because I got asked a very good question, I think yesterday, when somebody was asking, well, how do you manage your gear and stop your helmet and your sword and your sacks and your axe from getting rusty? So I have made a long form video about that today, which I've got to edit. and I've got so many videos to edit. I know I got a folder, my shorts folder has 3,000 videos in. So, that's a lot of videos I've got to go through. Yeah, probably 10% of those videos have been published. Another 10% will be no good, but I'm still going to have 1,000 to 2,000 videos alone in that folder I need to edit. And I've already started a new folder for this year. I'm already got about 330 videos in that I got to go through. Yeah, some of them, 10% will be no good, in the sense of there'll be 15-second videos where I'm sitting in the chair and standing up again. I don't always delete as I go along. But I am working. I'm working on filming also at different angles for some of my videos, because I recently invested some of the very little money I've got, because I'm on universal credit because I've been signed off ill for quite a while. So I'm living in a very big house and surviving off £400 a month and still managing to feed myself. Although I'm very resourceful, because I know where I can find food for free, which shops throw away every night if I'm really desperate. And I can go and hunt rabbits and find food in the hedgerows. So from that aspect, I'm very resourceful. But yeah, I mean, I could create a whole series of videos about universal credit and how to deal with them. Just all you got to say is just mention the 2010 Equality Act, and they've got to listen to you. So I've literally not been there for 5 months because I keep practicing what I preach, and I'm a firm believer in looking after and sticking up for yourself. So let's just go back to your comments. Yeah, so there's an awful lot of content which is very useful on the channel, and I do hope it's all quality. And I know I put out a lot of content. I'm so sorry that some days I may bombard you with 9 or 10, or even like last Friday where I put out, I think, 15 videos in a day. But I have to do that, because if I don't do that, I'm not going to get all the videos out. I can film more videos, so the more I film, the more I've got to deal with and edit, and getting better and better all the time at what we're doing. I could certainly teach people how to make content and how to be confident on the channel, how to be a storyteller. And it'd be amazing to travel, to Germany, to travel to France and Norway and Iceland and Australia, and meet all these amazing people that I've met over the years on the channel. Like Sharma, a guy from Australia who reenacts the Cornish from the 6th and 7th century. Amazing guy. And a lot of people move on. People find other channels. People stop watching content. No, that's all fair enough. But I do believe, and I got this complete belief within myself, that the channel will blow up. We will start to get the views, and all the hard work will pay off. And what I promise you, from the revenue I make, it's only going to be reinvested back on the channel. So if I do really well, then I'm going to fund having a longhouse built, because I've got a big garden and I've got room to put a longhouse. Now imagine that. There down the garden, I've got a Anglo-Saxon building or a longhouse. I can go and film. That's going to open up the channel to a lot of amazing things. Experimental archaeology, inviting really top professional guests and professors of history to come along and talk to, because this is, and I think, and I'm sure you agree, because I was thinking about this the other day. I know I'm rambling, but I think, I don't know what you guys think, I know there's only 2 of you watching, but I think I've fundamentally massively underestimated what I've created with this channel. Would you agree with that? Because I think myself, I don't think I realise, and because I'm very clever, I got a lot of awareness. I've got a lot of intelligence when it comes to being self-aware, but I think I've massively underestimated what I've done on this channel. And we certainly inspired a lot of channels, I think. And a lot of channels like Alex the History Guy, 53,000 subscribers, is a lot more successful. But then again, I think when you look at this channel, you can probably tell I've got ADHD and a new thing. I wonder what Vikings would be like with ADHD. And I don't mind it. It's the way I am. But I cope with it. And for a lot of years, I smoked cannabis too, and I know it's a bad thing. I keep thinking about going down the medical route if I ever get back into that, because I don't want to take modern pharmaceuticals, because I don't trust modern pharmaceuticals, because, you know, my doctor's on about giving me a tablet which will increase my blood pressure, increase my chance of heart attack, and probably shorten my life. And then you go for one tablet, you have to go for another tablet. And before I know it, I'll be on 24 tablets. So this is why I always trust herbal medicine, and you know, nature provides, you know, the medicine for us. But a lot of that information, a lot of the herb craft, you know, has been lost. But there are some amazing YouTubers like that Dan Hughes Herb Garden. And I know I'm getting the name wrong, but an amazing channel, you know, really nice people. I'd love to go there and visit them and say hello. You know, randomly walk by in my Viking kit, and you know, so yeah. So I think we're so lucky, and you know, some people will say, "Oh, YouTube's dying; it's going to be a dead thing." But I saw the other day that, you know, you can have Disney and all these amazing channels and TV programs, you know, TV channels, and they don't come anywhere near YouTube. So YouTube is, and I think it will always be, the most dominant place for content and for learning. And, you know, you're talking about, you know, thank you for so many useful info videos on your channel. Well, this is why I'm concentrating. I'm preparing. I'm filming this 50 episode series about how to be a Viking, you know, and I'm going to do a lot of guides on how to wear kit correctly and how to do this, and, you know, give more of my knowledge, because knowledge is free and should always be free. Well, I'm at the point where I've got nobody watching. I am going to say goodbye, unless somebody joins. I'll tell you what, nobody watching. I can eat some meat. Oh, I can eat some meat and have some breakfast. I only eat one meal a day. And then King Edward the Turbulent, and I do love that name. One day we'll have to meet up. And I know you're saying some time ago to me to find somewhere local that does crafting. I did have a look. If you ever find anybody that does crafting, like in a woodland near Derby, then please let me know, because you might have better contacts than that. But they say there are many YouTube channels like yourself that I watch to learn new things and history that I find interesting. Oh, well, yeah, there is. But as a content creator, you know, some days I don't want to watch content because I live and breathe it. You know, when you're editing and living and breathing it 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, it's nice to have a break. That's not bad, that. I cooked it last Friday, and I made a nice curry last night with it. Yeah, eating on camera is something I'm very conscious about. But I bet their YouTube channel, I mean, the Rate My Takeaway, that's a fascinating channel, even though of all the problems he's had. And I wish him very well. But I would like to film some videos like that, you know, reviewing food. That'd be interesting, you know, from a Viking perspective, because everything's got to be from a medieval perspective if it's going to work on the channel. I know on TikTok, one of our fans is Michael Barrymore. Yeah, he follows me, and I like some of his videos, how he, you know, goes and films a Munchie run. So I might think about doing that. You know, more videos about the day in the life of Braggy, behind the scenes, you know, going to a pub, trying some beer, you know. So some of those videos will come. A lot of videos where I travel to places, go to castles. So King Edward the Turbulent says, I have autism, and when it comes to topics like I talk to a lot of people about it, the Viking, Scottish or pirate history. I used to belong to a pirate society in Derby, and we were called the Derby Pirate Landlocked Society because we had no sea, but we liked pirates. It was just basically an excuse to dress as a pirate and drink. I'm still waiting for my autism assessment. I know my doctor wants me to have one. He speculated that I may have Asperger's, but then again, I like social aspects. mostly, because I'll go to the pub and I'll talk to anybody. I just go to the pub and talk about a channel. Oh, I'm a YouTuber. Well, I'm always trying to convert people, but I've definitely got some form of autism, I think. And then for quite a while, I didn't really want to go down that route of getting diagnosed. Like, recently being diagnosed with ADHD. Well, I knew that already. If you've got ADHD, I think you know you got ADHD. And I can be over there, I can be over here. I'm thinking about this 1 minute, and next minute I'm thinking about something else, and my brain's firing at the speed of light. I think because of all the neurons firing, bang, 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 bang. It's like my brain is ticking over at the speed of light, and I think this is one of the reasons why I've gone so deep into this channel. And I'm not finished. It's like I was looking at on YouTube today about C-axes. There's a lot of videos on C-axes. We put a lot of videos out of C-axes. There's some very good ones from the school of Gladiatoria, whatever the name is. But there's nothing really specific that goes into the really fine archaeological data and resources on C-axes. So I don't mind thinking about doing something like that, which is why I've done some deep dives in the last few months. Yeah, and then King Edward says it takes a long to hear back from autism assessment people. I think I was on the list for 1 or 2 years. Well, yeah, definitely. I was on the list for ADHD for 18 months, even though I did ignore a few of the emails. And then they fast-tracked me just before Christmas. But, yeah, I mean, it's where it is. I am who I am, and I don't want to be anybody else, It's a bit like that movie, isn't it? Me, myself, and I. Lovely. And then, I've already done a few mental health videos because I think it's important as a content creator that you talk about the bigger issues without going too far into politics. I know I made a lot of those funny short videos on Keir Starmer last year. I learned a lot from those videos, but all those videos are now being unlisted. I'm drinking a mixture of Shipmans. When did this go out of date? Oh, last May. It'll be fine. I've got a Viking stomach, and then I'm drinking Stella at the same time in the same glass. It's like a Mickey Mouse. It's called half and half. So Kevin Nadian says, "Is that beer you're drinking? Looks yummy." Yes, it is. And then I've got a big piece of pork. I've got some Viking biscuits and some mustard because I've not had my breakfast yet. And I do have a lot of videos to review of beers because I was working for Weatherspoons back in 2023-24, and I was doing a morning shift. So at 9 o'clock, I would end my shift, and then I would have a couple of pints and walk home. So every time I had a different beer, I filmed it, and I filmed the beer tab label, and I've got to go through all those videos and actually do a voiceover for them. But that's another thing in the pipeline because I love my beer and I love my ale, and my local brewery is Samuel Smith's. So I like their stout and I like their mild, and then they have the Taddy beer and the Alpine. Well, being a local, we don't have the Alpine or the Taddy on its own. We have what you call a half and half. So we have half a pint of Alpine and half a pint of Taddy, and then that brings it up to about 4%, and that's quite nice. I do like a lager now and again. In fact, this Stella is thank you, Stuart, for leaving your beer around my house a few weeks back. He's an old friend of mine, old school Jamaican. heritage guy who I'm going to bring on the channel at some point. So, and he says, "Hell," and Kevin Nadian, so you taking the word of Canadian, yeah. And I know I need glasses, and I'm not very good at pronouncing things, and I choose the most difficult channel to do content on when it comes to pronunciation. I mean, on a good day, I can't even pronounce. He says, "Hello from Canada." And he says, and then King Edward says, "I think Vikings who would have had autism and ADHD would have had adrenaline rush when on raids." Yeah. And then he says, and King Edward says, "I'm more of a whiskey and rum drinker than beer. Yeah, I do love my rum. I've always got a decanter of rum in the house. You know, just for those special occasions. I'm not a massive drinker at home, surprisingly. I am." When I go out, I'll have 4 or 5 pints. On a good day, if I've got a meal, I can drink 8 to 10 pints and still not really be that drunk. So I can definitely hold my liquor. But it's funny how some days you go out and you have 3 pints and you feel drunk, and then you're going to have 8 pints and you don't feel drunk. Funny that. And no doubt Vikings would have had ADHD, and no doubt they would have had, you know, autism, but they would have no concept of what they were. It's a little bit about metallurgy, you know, when we think about the knives we use and how they would have had, you know, an iron backing on the main body and then a good quality steel. But the Saxons and the Vikings had no concept of carbon. They did not understand the physics of what's going on in a furnace when you're making crucible steel. I mean, we do now. We have a lot of information and knowledge when it comes to metalworking. We understand the physics of what's going on. But when you think about back in the day, when you're forming a crucible of your finest quality iron, one thing that they did understand the process that if you keep on heating the metal, the better the quality the metal got. They understood that. And then back in the 7th and 8th and 9th century, some of the scholars of the time, mostly within the church, did write down a lot of the recipes for making crucible steel. And some of these survive in 11th and 12th century copies. But the thing about when you got an original text from the 8th century, and then 2 centuries later, it gets translated. Every time you translate a text and a manuscript, they get things wrong, or the more it's translated, the more things they get wrong. So there's a couple of very famous manuscripts that talk about, you know, how they made the crucible steel and the different recipes that go into it. But when you go back and you think about an Anglo-Saxon workshop or a Viking workshop, they would not be using a manuscript to learn how to make crucible steel, for instance, because that was passed down in the knowledge. And I've just been reading a very good book. It's upstairs on Anglo-Saxon crafts, but I do have a vast library, and I'm always looking at buying more books and reading more knowledge. And, you know, I tend to read something, you know, I think, oh, that'd be a good video. So, and this is one of the aspects about why the Norse, you know, raided. One of the things they were looking for when they traded and they raided was sources for crucible steel, because it makes sense. You know, you're setting off from Norway, and your bottom of your longship will have a lot of stones in it for the ballast and the weight. Well, if you go to the Mediterranean and let's say you go and sack a town, and you found a lot of crucible steel, well, you're going to throw your stones out and you're going to put the steel at the bottom. You know, the crucible forms at the bottom of the longship. Maybe they're in long ingots. It depends on how they're made. Often they're kind of round with a flat top, if you know anything about making crucible steel. So it makes perfect sense that you'll throw out your ballast and you'll replace it with the heavy goods you find. And like I said, you know, back in the day, if you got a master blacksmith or anybody that's working with metal, they will probably never heard of these manuscripts and all of that data and evidence which got recorded, because not many people could read. I mean, we take Bede, for instance, and his amazing work. Who did he write it for? because not many people could read back in those days. I mean, there's so many of the Anglo-Saxon and Norse kings could not even write or read themselves. Reading and writing, it's a power, because if you control what people read, you control the narrative, don't you? So it does make you think. And this is probably one of the reasons why, you know, the Vikings, the Norse took slaves back, especially in monks and Christians, because they are very obedient, and some of the monks had the ability to write and read, and that to them would be astonishing. So Kevnadian, there we go, got it right. He says, how similar was Anglo-Saxon paganism to Norse paganism? Do you know if Anglo-Saxon pagans also had a concept of Valhalla, hell, etc.? Well, yes, I mean, they're very similar in many ways, because we give the names, the gods different names: Thor, Thunar, Saxnot, for instance, Woden, Odin. So in many aspects, they would be very similar, and they would have their own version of Valhalla, or Valhall is the correct term in the Dark Ages. Valhalla is more of a modern concept term of it. So there would have been their equivalent, because a lot of this religion came from Proto-Germanic and goes back to the Germanic period, and then it also goes back to the classical Bronze Age of Scandinavian and the northern countries of Europe, like Germany, which of course didn't exist until rather recently. So it made up of different kingdoms like Saxony and so forth. I know Survive the Drive, he's got some very fascinating videos on Anglo-Saxon paganism, which I keep meaning to sit down and watch and try to teach myself more, because of the Christianization of the Anglo-Saxons. The Christian aspect of it and the later aspect would not want that information to be around, because, you know, it will be heresy to them. So a lot of that information is lost. That is why we only know of a certain number of the Anglo-Saxon gods, for instance. Now we know more about the Norse because of the fact that, you know, they got paganized much later, and the written accounts fundamentally survive, and that's how we know it from the sagas and from the other sources. So yeah, but it's a fascinating subject. And, you know, if for instance, you know, I'm dressed like this, although I'm wearing fundamentally an Iron Age cloak, but I get away with it in the Viking time because, you know, they had all different sorts of fabrics of patterns, and this square formation is a very old pattern. So if there's two of me, and one of them is Saxon and one of them is Norse, and we're both wearing the same clothing, then we would fundamentally look the same. The difference would be the small details, like I'm wearing a Thor's hammer. As a Saxon Christian, I'll be wearing a cross, for instance. And don't forget, in the Norse culture, if I was married, for instance, I had a wife, a wife in Saxon is where we get the word from, I would not be wearing my jewellery, because I'll be letting my wife wear my jewellery and all the beads and the finery, because I would want my wealth to show up on her, which is something that was very much practiced. So, you know, and I've got to do a little bit more research in early Anglo-Saxon paganism, because, you know, I've read a lot over the years, but I've forgotten more than I remember, and it would be good. So Survive the Jive, he's done some fantastic videos. Really wonderful guy on channel on Anglo-Saxon paganism in much more detail. But at some point when I do the research and I find the time to watch those videos, because when I watch videos like that, I learn more. When I learn more, I can tell you guys more. And if we can ever get the channel host Turkey to come back, which I'm hoping to, because he's such a lovely guy, and, you know, we kind of not talked for quite a while. I did find his number the other day and sent him a text, and he sent me a lovely text back. And I guess we kind of partly fell out over the channel for various reasons, but we won't go into that, because that's the past, and it's now is the most important aspect of the time we live in, and what happens from now in the future. And, you know, I'm sure Turkey would give you a lot more information about the Anglo-Saxon, you know, faith. But, you know, people specialise within this period of history on different things. So for a lot of my time, I specialised when I was reenacting on either the combat side of things, the weapon side of things, or the craft side of things. So yeah, so just give me time. I will learn that and make those videos, because I think getting more into depth about, you know, the Anglo-Saxon faith, and the more we talk about it, the more we understand in the future, and the more we can move forward with better knowledge. Because I don't know everything, but you know, I can talk about most subjects. There's not a subject I can't talk about, but I don't have a massive, you know, pages of information, because I sometimes find it difficult to read, and because my energy flows. At the moment, I'm doing well because, you know, I can't regulate my sleep pattern. But it's at times when I go quiet on the channel, it's because I'm probably suffering with my chronic insomnia, and I'm waking up at 6 in the evening and going to bed at 10 in the morning, which is completely ridiculous. But I just can't regulate my sleep some days. I'm getting a little bit better at it, I must say. So when I'm on a good sleep pattern, my production is like through the roof. And then when I need that time off to rest, because, you know, everybody needs to rest. So sometimes, you know, I need to let my brain settle and not get too overcrowded. So, and then Canadian says, I appreciate how insightful and knowledgeable you are. Yes, and I'm learning all the time. And, you know, this journey on this channel is only really beginning, to be fair. You know, because now that I'm going to have the ability to travel, where, you know, let's say in the future when my life comes, when everything comes together. So, you know, I've been, I guess in a way, I've been like in this life of limbo ever since I was a carer for my dad, because my life put on hold. But because life is changing, it's going to change to the point where, you know, I could say next week, right, you know, I won't need a job in the future. This will be my full-time job, and it is my full-time job. Not that I'm making any money out of it, but the legacy is more important, because when I'm dead, I like to think to myself that you'll still be watching my videos. And yeah, I do have videos scheduled for like 100 years from now. I know it's a bit ridiculous, but I do constantly think about that, you know. I mean, I'm hoping I've got another 30 to 50 years on the planet. So, you know, I do think about these things, and I think to myself, you know, I'm losing track now because I've got too many thought processes going around my head. So yeah, but I do think, and I say it again, I do think I vastly underestimate what I have created with this channel. Do you agree with that? Because I really do. I think about it, and I don't think I realise. Although on the one hand, I do realise I know what I've done. I know what I've created, because I've edited every video. I've been in a lot of videos. I've answered every comment. You know, most people in my situation on YouTube with such a channel would have a whole team, but I'm doing everything. This is why sometimes I wear myself out and I burn myself out. But this is why I film a lot, and I've always got videos scheduled. I think at the moment I must have about 300 to 400 videos scheduled. So I'm never going to run out of content. If I need a day off, I can just find videos I've got in hand, even though those videos will still need a little bit of work each day, because I'm not that organised. But I'm getting better at it. So on the one hand, I do realise what I've created with this channel, but on the other hand, I think I've vastly underestimated what I've done and what I've created, and how fantastic this journey is going to be. I'll drink more beer. Just celebrate. Cheers. Skull. Good health. May Thor give you strength, and may Freya make your women fertile. But what you find in reenactment terms on this side of history is that people specialise in different subjects. So you may have one guy, you know, Olaf, you could call him. He may specialise in Anglo-Saxon paganism. You'd have another guy who specialises in chainmail or ring shirts. I mean, chainmail is a modern term, but if I said to somebody, "Oh, would you like to see me in my, you know, shirt of rings?" They don't always understand that term. We do, because we know our history. But a lot of people don't. And then King Edward says, and any of you guys ever want the blue tick? You know, once I've seen you on the live stream a few times in the comments, I give the blue tick. to people that have been around on the channel, as a sign of respect, and because I respect all you guys, and I thank you all for taking part and leaving likes and comments. So when you see people with the blue tick, it's because I've got my deepest respect for you as a fan, and you're my friends like I am your friend. So King Edward says, some of the few things that I like about ancient and medieval times are not only the history and the jewellery that they have, but also the coins from that era. Yeah, I do have quite a few coins, but I don't know where they are in my house. And I would really love to invest in getting some coin dies, showing how to make coins, and then build up a nice big war chest of coins. That would be lovely. You know, I'd like to get into metal detecting and do some of that for you guys as well, because I know some land where I can get access to, which goes way back to the Saxon times, and you know, magnet fishing, that fascinates me. So I like to have a little bit, you know, a little go at everything, but still keeping the medieval theme. It's like when I've done the videos last year about mental health, I've tried to relate it to the medieval times as equally when it comes to the modern times. Like I made a video about solitude. No script, just me talking about it. I've got keywords in front of me. You don't see those keywords. I mean, I did a video about you know, how loneliness, for instance, because that's a very terrible thing in society. And you know, I very rarely get lonely because I got too many things to do, and I'm quite happy in my own company. I mean, I do struggle with the old concept of living with somebody, because I never lived with anybody, apart from my dad, of course, and my parents. I think I would fundamentally, in a relationship, find that at first very difficult. But because I'm very adaptive, I'm sure I would adapt. So Canadian says, when did you first become interested in Viking and Anglo-Saxon history? Well, it would be when I was a child, because I love history as a child. And my dad very much encouraged me to get into history. He would always buy me books and take me to museums. So I became fascinated in Norse and Viking culture. I became fascinated in all aspects of history. I mean, I must share some of the pictures I got as a child of me, you know, sitting on tanks and next to planes and at museums. So all throughout my childhood, I used to collect weapons. So I've been collecting weapons for many years. A lot of them I sold on in my teens and my 20s, not thinking about the future. So, you know, if you have something, before you sell it, really think about what you're selling. And then because as a teenager, I was challenging my Christian upbringing, you know, I felt like there was something missing from my life. So I tried, you know, different forms of paganism, witchcraft, you know, Wicca, for instance. I became a high priest in a coven. I tried a bit of druidry, and I became a hedge witch at one point. But that wasn't for me. But all in the background, I was always reading about the sagas, and I had lots of books about the Vikings. And whenever I saw a book about the Vikings or the Saxons, I went and bought it straight away. So all throughout my childhood and my late teens, back in my teenage years, I had this fascinating aspect about my life, about, you know, an alternative faith. You know, there's something calling to me. And all the way along that journey, you know, it was always the Norse aspect and the Saxon aspect that fascinated me. And in 99, when I was at a multi-period history event at, what was the event called? Kirby Hall. And there'll be 3,000 to 4,000 people taking part, if not more than that. And in the reenactment scene, you do a lot of waiting around before the battle, because your blooming officers and your majors and your colonels, you always like to keep your soldiers waiting. So we were waiting for a big battle to commence. You know, there was probably 1,000 of us on the battlefield just for this one battle between Confederates and the Union. And I think it was actually more than that. I think it was probably more like 2,000. I was standing around waiting, and because you do a lot of waiting, I decided to go and sit near a tree. And then all these Vikings appeared, and you know, me being interested in Vikings, I got up and started talking to them. And the first Viking I talked to, a name called Gary, I said, oh, I'd love to have a go at this. And he said, oh, where are you from? I said, I'm from Derby. He said, oh, bloody hell. I said, all the people around me, the Vikings, were all from Derby. So, and from the Derby group. So I said, oh, I gave him my number, in the old days when you had your telephone number on a piece of paper, wrote it down. And he phoned me up and he says, why don't you come along to one of our battle practices on a Sunday? And I did, and I loved it ever since. So, and I did that partly because of my faith as a Norse pagan, because I wanted to prove my worth to Odin and the gods. So dressing up for me and taking part in battle reenactment was a way for me to show respect to the gods and get in touch with my heritage on that whole journey. And then, of course, many years went along. Then a lot of politics got involved in the local group, and the group we had was completely destroyed by politics and people's greed. This is a long, long story. So, and that's sad, it really is, because we don't have a group in Derby anymore, technically. So then, after that politics got involved about 8 or 9 years later, about 2007 or 8, I kind of just stopped doing medieval reenactment because A, I got fed up with the politics, and B, I had an ex-girlfriend who I didn't really want to hang about with. I was in the same group, so I kind of felt like a little bit awkward about it and kind of stopped doing it. And then went back to the Civil War Society again, because that was the first reenactment group and society I joined. And there's always going to be a home for me there, because I'm very much loved as a person. I made a lot of friends, and I definitely want to go back to that era history, and maybe even think about introducing, because I do have a lot of knowledge about the American Civil War, and maybe adding a little bit of that to the channel, but without talking about muskets and guns too much, because I did the live stream once and I showed a musket and it got taken down straight away. I learned a lesson there. So maybe I may go into the later period, because I want to try to cover everything in the long run. And I've got a friend of mine called Jim, who's a major in one of the World War II societies. So I might think about a year sacrificing my hair and getting my hair cut short and doing a year doing World War II, because I don't mind doing that again. But we'll see. So go back to your comments. So yes, I've always been in. So I've been into Saxon and Viking history for over 40 years. But normally I don't have a beard. I'm growing a beard. I've had a beard a few times. I'm quite conscious about growing a beard, but so far I'm doing okay, because I'm managing to put up with the stubborn itchiness of it, and that's why I've got my cheeks bare. Because if I had a full beard, it would drive me absolutely crazy, and I'll just wake up at 4 in the morning and think, oh, sod it, I can't cope anymore, I'm going to shave my beard off. So I'm just going for this sort of a design of beard I can cope with. But it does make me look my age, and I'm trying to be a lot younger in spirit and body. And that's actually backed by science. There's a lot of scientific research which demonstrates that if you think you're younger and you act younger, then your body reacts. And that also is a part of longevity science, which I find fascinating. But going back to your comments, as I said, I would like to get a Robert the Bruce coin if I could find a place to buy one from. Is that a replica or an original? So you could look at Dave the Moneyer. His name's Grundle. He is one of probably the best coin experts and manufacturers of coins in the UK. I mean, he's been on Time Team a few times, where, Time Team, classic and brilliant program back in the 90s. And I'm so glad it's been brought back on YouTube. I wish I had a little bit more patience and time to watch those programs. But when you live and breathe history, I sometimes want to watch something different. So at the moment, I'm going through a whole series of watching Minder, classic 80s TV program, because I got to give myself time off from thinking medieval, or else I'll drive myself crazy. So yeah, so Dave the Moneyer, lovely, amazing guy. He's made a few things for me over the years. He's been on Time Team quite a few times. you know, and they found like a coin in the ground and they cleaned it up and they see the markings and they say, oh, we don't know what this is. And then they take it to Dave and Dave said, oh, yeah, that's a King Edward coin, very rare from the 8th century and not many of them were produced. So he's an absolute expert. So you could try, if you type in Dave the Moneyer and Grundle, Grundao, he's got a website as far as I know, and he may produce those coins for you, because that's one of the things I always recommend. You know, I do get asked a lot, you know, where can I buy a sword from, where can I buy my authentic clothing from? So I'm always looking for more contacts. So if you are a reenactor and you know somebody that makes, you know, amazing stuff, then please let us know. And of course, one thing we're always looking for is people who make things to send us things for free, because then I'll review it on camera like a Sax and give you a good review. And I'm fairly certain that would pay off and give you more business, because, you know, people often say to me, oh, Braggy, where can I buy a sword from? Oh, do you know a good maker of Saxes? Oh, I want a nice tunic. Do you know anybody that makes them by hand? So original coins. Yeah, so you definitely want to go to one of the antique markets then. Other than that, if you go to London outside the British Museum, there's quite a few shops that sell original coins. And then King Edward says, there's an antique shop in Lichfield that sells ancient and medieval coins. Oh, great. Back in Lichfield, back in the day, there was also a very good shop that sold beads, glass beads, and quite a few of the beads which I wear came from that shop. And I don't know whether they're still around, but I've not been to Lichfield for like over 15 years. I've driven past it a few times. So Kevnadian says, if someone is in Hull, could they visit an ancestor in Valhalla or one of the other afterlife realms? That's a fascinating aspect. I mean, I know within the context of how to get in Valhalla, there's often said to be other ways to get into Valhalla other than dying on the battlefield. Secret ways, you could say, and ways in which maybe the gods would travel to Valhalla or Valhalla. So if you was in Hull, would you be allowed to leave Hull and go to Valhalla? I don't think you would. I think once you go to Hull and you stand in the queue and you have your nails and your toenails taken off you, which is then put on that long ship made out of people's dead nails, waiting for Ragnarok, which is where all the people from Hull get on and then they go to Ragnarok to it. So I don't think there would be. But because we don't have a lot of sources, because so many sources are missing, because so many manuscripts got burnt, we don't have all the information. But I think it's an interesting concept and question, and I must try to remember that for a video, because I do often find videos from your comments. And one thing I've been doing recently is actually replying to comments. And I made a load of comment replies from my TikTok videos today. And I wish it was a little bit easier on YouTube. Normally when and I got quite a few comments from about 2 weeks ago where I got some lovely comments and I made a video, but I still got to A, find the video in my file, and B, find the comment. And I know I had one of them which was saying, you know, on your knees to Christ, you Norse fool. And I made a reaction video to that, saying how I won't bow to no man, no king, and no god, because that's one thing which Odin will never say to you, is bow before him, because that's not our way. We stand firm, and we stand firm because we are Norse and we are pagan, and you should never bow to no pagan king, to no man, and to no god. And I will not bow to nobody. But I did it in a jokey, funny way. But I still got to find the video, and I still got to find the comment. And then I think last week where Elizabeth Hanson, although the guy's called William, made a comment about what's that red thing or what's the blue thing I'm wearing. So I made a reaction long form video about that. So I do look at your comments, and you know, and I will go back again in time, and I will make more videos from the comments. So yeah, I think if Turkey was here, he'll give you a better answer. But I don't think you can leave Hull. Once you go to Hull, you're in Hull and you're waiting. Because if you could leave Hull, then why can't you leave Valhalla? You can't leave Valhalla. Once you're there, you're there. And let's face it, it sounds like a pretty great place to me. I mean, I'm sure Eggle's having a right good time tonight, wrestling, mortal men and gods and drinking massive horns of mead and, mead and random comment them and, doing these amazing things in Valhalla. So, I don't think you can leave Valhalla either. You have to wait until Ragnarok comes about, and then that's not the end of the world. It's just the end of this life, this world, and the beginning of the new one. Because people always think, oh, Ragnarok's the end thing, isn't it? Well, it's not. It's just the beginning of something else. And we don't fundamentally quite know. Well, we do, and we don't know what something else is. Because not all the gods survive. Like, for instance, Thor's children, which I can never remember the name of, they survived, and I'm fairly certain Thor survived, but I may be wrong. So, Nomad Dabes 9320, and I hope I pronounced your name right. Good day. How much influence did Saxon paganism have on the Christianity they had? Well, I think it had a lot of influence. But then again, Christianity also goes way back in time. So the Saxons, of course, will not influence the Bible to a certain degree, because the Bible goes back probably into the BC era of history. And of course, today's Bible is not fundamentally like the original Bible, because it's been censored and changed a lot. So if you buy an antique Bible and you buy a modern Bible, you will see a difference. Now, there's two really fascinating examples of this. And this is the Bible that Jehovah's Witnesses use, because within the Bible, there is a passage which talks about Jesus having children. But in the Bible of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and whenever Jehovah's Witnesses ever come round to my house, and I'm fairly certain I've been barred now, I always bring this up. I invite them in, and then they say, well, what about your Bible being censored? Because they take that passage out, because they don't want their followers to know that Christ may have a bloodline. And I expect he probably did have a bloodline. Let's face it, whether you're the son of God or a mortal man, if you get the opportunity to shag some bird, you're going to shag some bird. And most probably back in the day, she would have got pregnant and had children. And I'm fairly certain Jesus, equally, because it's not a bad thing, is it, sex? I mean, it's like humour. I mean, humour is not a bad thing. It's not been invented by the devil, for instance, unlike Brussels sprouts and tomatoes, which I think are the devil's work. But I've got a funny eating habit. So from that aspect, I think, Jesus, or as we call him in the Norse language, the Zweite Kleister, the White Christ, and I've learned that from Turkey, and so I think he would have had children. But then you look at the influence of, well, if you look at the Saxon and the Norse way of paganism, so in Norse paganism back in the day, and equally as much as modern paganism, even though people broke these things, we don't like gossipers, we don't like rumour mongers, liars, oath breakers, we don't like adulterers, murderers. But how many of those things are very similar to the Ten Commandments? Thou will not covet thy neighbour's wife. I live next door to Christians, and they certainly don't come round here and love thy neighbour. But that's another, and she's a vicar. That's another story. God bless them, and I hope they're all right. But I live on a very big road with big houses, and nobody, apart from down my garden, none of my neighbours talk to each other. So it's very funny how in the commandments we have these aspects, and whether the pre and the early Bible influenced the pagans, or whether that was already a belief system within the pagan world. I expect it was probably a belief system already in the pagan world, that in in hell there are many holes, and those many holes have different purposes, and depending what you've done as a bad person determines what hole you go to. So you go to hell, the underworld, and there's a hole for liars, and there's a hole for oath breakers and murderers, for instance. But as a Norse, pagan, if you butcher somebody in battle, is that murder? Well, probably not the same as just butchering somebody for no reason. There's a reason for warfare, but there isn't always fundamentally a reason for killing somebody just out of the blue, unless it's for money and greed, and that's often the way. So there are very similarities, but that's such a massive subject. And I'm very lucky. I've been to Bethlehem and I've been to Jerusalem and Israel, and fascinating country. I wouldn't go there right now as a tourist. I'll say run away. And then Canadian says, I must go now. Thanks for entertaining talks. Well, you're more than welcome. And then King Edward says, depending on which version of paganism you follow, like Hercules, son of Zeus, Jesus would be classed as a demigod if he was born from a god. Well, yes, that's very, very true. Let's drink some more beer. Wonderful beer. Wonderful beer. We'll put some more lager in here. It reminds me of that joke. And then Gnome Dave's 9320 says, I guess they would be similar. Yes, most of the religions that spread and were important pushed from the world where people wouldn't be at each other's throats for no reason. Yeah, and don't forget, religion is also about controlling people. So there was once a Viking, and he got up in the morning and he had a bath. Then after he had a bath, he decided to have a little shower. And when he had a shower, he decided to go and have a wash in a stream. And when he's finished washing in the stream, he decided that, well, he's going to wash under a waterfall. More beer. Then he was thirsty and decided to have a drink of water. And then he had to wash his teeth, and that involved drinking more water and beer. After that, a man came round with a drinking horn, and he thought, well, I'm thirsty again. I'll have a bit of that. And then he decided to go and have another bath with beer. And then he met a monk on the road with a Saxon. He said, you must wash your mouth out, for you've been swearing, he says. And he said, well, I can only wash my mouth out, Mr. Monk, with beer. And so he had another drink. And then he went to another longhouse, and they had a big bowl of water. And he thought, well, I'm mucky, I'm sweaty. I'm going to have another bath with more lovely beer. And after all day of doing that, he was very drunk. So Solomon Riemann 799, did the Vikings use the 2 silver coins for the fair ferry, man's fair? Yeah, I think I've heard on one hand that yes, you had to pay a coin to get to Helheim, but why the Helheim? But why would you pay a coin to go to Hull? But on the other hand, I've heard you don't. So I don't think you do pay any coins. But what if you take coins to your burial because your grave goods go with you? So it does make you think, doesn't it? So perhaps, so let's say, you're a Norse pagan and you've done some bad things and you get, you die and they give you a bit of a good send off, because a burial in the Norse times, it wasn't about the end cycle, it was about the beginning cycle of you going somewhere else. Whether that was, if you're very noble and rich, whether that's a ship burial or even, being burnt on the ship. And it's amazing how many people these days like their ashes to be sent on a little longship into the ocean and burnt. And then, of course, you also had burial mounds and taking your wealth with you. And then you also had cremation. It was another method. But often, we find in the graves of the early Saxons and of the Norse, they take grave goods with you. Yes, you may take a few coins, you may take a pot of ale, you may have a sax or a knife or a shield laid across you. So if those things fundamentally die with you and go with you onto your journey, whether it's to Valhalla or whether it's to Helheim, do they take them off you? So it makes sense that if you go to Hull, they're going to take all your belongings. But where do your belongings go? Or do you keep them in the halls in Helheim? I think that's a fascinating question. And I wish I had a better answer for you. Oh, I'm about to go now, Sam. No, I'm pulling your leg. So Gnome Dabes 9320. What was Norse stroke paganism perception of magic, witchery? I have read somewhere that they considered it humanely, but Odin uses it very often. No. Is it allowed because of it? It's a god. Well, yeah. So he's probably allowed to use magic because of a god. But I think, certainly the magic side of things in Norse paganism would be practiced, but also you'll also have a small minority of people practicing some form of shamanism as well, even though that probably slightly went out of fashion and became less practiced and would have been the rarity, and depending on where you are in Scandinavia. And it's so there would have been some of that left, but because of the fact that we don't have all the sources, because we lost so much, we don't know those things, but we know they must have practiced some sort of magic, or certain people would have been seen as practicing magic. And I mean, we have the concepts of witchcraft of being a bad thing, but then that's probably a little bit later, where if you was a witch, you'd be burnt at the stake. So, and the magical side of things is not something I know a great deal about, and I really must learn. There's a very good channel which I can't remember the name of. If you type in Norse paganism and magic, you will find it. It's from Iceland. He's got some very complex and deep, thinking videos on the subject, and a lot of it's speculation because we don't have the sources, because those sources were fundamentally lost. But certainly, seers, for instance, the use of runes, the recognition of symbolism all around you would have been very important. But at the same time, they didn't fundamentally think like we did because of the pre-Christian culture. We think because of our, because of the Abrahamic upbringing most of us have had in Europe and in the Western world, because we are fundamentally from Christian nations, we therefore have this Abrahamic way of thinking because it's been doctrined onto us from childhood. But of course, and we all think in the same sense, but it's not like, I'm not saying that they thought differently, but what I'm saying, they had a different way of thinking because of their pagan roots. For us, it's very difficult to understand that concept. And it's a bit like, the old concept of tell it how it is. When if you're thinking more like a pre-pagan or a pagan Norse person, a pre-Christian person, whether that's Saxon, whether that's from a Norse point of view, then we see things differently because of our Abrahamic thinking, but they would have seen it and being more brutal. It's very much like, if you're trying to think like an original Norse pagan, it's like being very brutal and honest and not putting up with crap. and that upsets people because I practice it myself, where you speak your mind, and if you see somebody that's behaving badly because they're an idiot, you go, you're saying, well, you're an idiot, but people don't always like the truth. And because of our Abrahamic upbringing, whether you like it or not, we all have it. We're all being indoctrinated through the education system, and to think the way we do with a Christianized world, it's very difficult to get back to that concept of thinking like somebody who has not been brought up as a Christian, and most of us have been, regardless of whether you're happy or not, because it's all around us. The UK, England, is a Christian country, or it should be. But yeah, so it's a fascinating subject and a very complex subject, to be fair. And yeah, as I progress, I will look to investigate some of these things a little bit more. So we have a lovely comment here from Sam Stapleton, a friend, one of my brothers, as you all are, and he says, "I made it, my friend. Congratulations, but I won't be around for too much longer because I don't know what time it is, and at some point I'll keep on for a while. Whilst there's people watching, I will stay awake, but I've got to get up relatively early tomorrow at about 10 o'clock in the morning. Oh, look at me, I got another line." So, and then Solomon Riemann says, "Lo, there, do I see the breath of my Father, mine, lo, there do I see." Sorry, I did that by accident. Oh no, you go for it. And then they say 2 silver coins for the Ferryman's Fair, Holt of Valhalla, a warning bow tolling, Craig a raven's crowling, and murder, a silent contemplation, the stairs of the satires, a lone misty boat ride. Oh yes, and I want to go to Valhalla. I'm not home. So Sam Stapleton says, "Can you think of any medallions you would like to have recreated?" Well, if you look at brachiotex, so it's not an easy word to spell, but brachiotex are like a throwback to the Roman age, and they kind of carried on. And brachiotex are fascinating little medallions. So if you look at, I'll send you some pictures of brachiotex. I've got quite a few, but there's literally hundreds have been found, and they're kind of based on kind of a coin design, but they're being manipulated and changed independent. So I would look at brachiotex. I think it's bracteates is the way you spell it. I did make a video about it many years ago, and if you used to see the necklace I used to wear my own with all the beads, I used to have 2 brachiotex, but at some point the leather thongings broke, and I've not quite got them back together to put it back together. I'll have to do that in a video, I think, and put my necklace back together with too many beads. But yeah, brachiotex are fascinating. They really are. Often made of silver, often made from bronze, brass, which is more of a lower metal, but so bronze, silver, and gold, you'll often find them, and they've been found all throughout Europe, and they are a little bit of a throwback to the Roman era, because it does make you think, there's an Anglo-Saxon, and he's digging, near an old Roman town, and he finds an old, chest that has deteriorated, and there's all these old coins and medallions. So a medallion, a brachiotex is the original medallion, and they're fascinating. I've got the one with Odin on the horse, and then you have various other different designs. Often they've got a plain back. Yeah, copper would be fine for a brachiotex. So yeah, and they're normally, I would say they're about 30 millimeters across. So I can give you dimensions, and there must be some specialist books out there, but no. I saw a lovely one the other day, which is like a brachiotex, which has been half eroded away, but it's got lovely designs on. Some of them would be on 2 sides, but a lot of them would be just a design on the front and a plain backing. But I think originally they would have probably had a design on both sides, because if you're making something and you're casting something, why would you leave the back plain? It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, so yeah, I'll have a look, and I'll, yeah, I would love to have some recreated. And I did give you a shout out earlier, but I mentioned yeah, Direwolf Forge. So you're always going to have shout outs as our official blacksmith on the channel from Texas. Oh yes, I'm definitely going to have to visit Texas and visit you. If you put me up for a week or so, I'll have to think about. I'll have to speak to the American embassy, but for various reasons. But I'll talk to you off screen about that. But if not this year, next year, because I'm going to be in a position where I can just say to myself, right, next week I've got nothing on, I've got all my videos planned. Let's just fly to Texas, because I'll be able to do that. That's not going to be a problem in the long run for me. Just at the moment, I couldn't even get myself out of Derby. But in the future, I'm going to have the ability to say to myself, yeah, let's go and meet my friends and travel the world. So, yeah, you're definitely on the list of people to visit. Perhaps we could do some smithing and films. We'll film some videos together, yeah, if we're up for that. And and I've not forgotten, I'm going to make you a cloak. It's just give me time, because I've got to have the money to get the material in. But my next lot of material, I'm going to buy some extra and make you a lovely Viking age cloak. You never know, I might make you a hat as well. So that's a promise, because I love the fact that you made me something, and I'm going to make you something in return. But I think that's absolutely beautiful, and I might think about making hats for people, so you could have a braggy hat. But I don't have to spend all my life making things, because I've got too much work to do on the channel as it is. But yeah, but I'm probably going to make hats, and then they're going to do like competitions and give them away for the community page. That's what I'm planning to do as well. And then Solomon Weeman says, Eaters of the Dead by Michael Crichton is the first account with life with Vikings. A lad from Baghdad got mixed up with them. Yeah, that's actually, I've heard of that before. And then Sam says, I'll definitely put you up and definitely consider me the channel's blacksmith. Yes, you are our official blacksmith. If you ever want anything made, I do recommend you speak to Sam. And and I love the fact that we've got Norse and our Viking brothers, brothers, and our sisters all over the world, because it's all about family and it's all about connection. And this is what we're creating a community. And as I often say, it's your channel as much as mine. If you want me to do a video, just send me an email or send me a message. If I remember, and if I forget, to keep badgering me, an old saying, because I've only got so many brain cells going around, and I got so many ideas to film. And then Gnomed Daves. I really do need to find some glasses. So that I get it. Ancient people will believe in more too, like the way they believe signs of the gods. Christians too gave meaning, power, and symbol, and even items nowadays we find magic silly. But magic truly exists. I practice, and I consider myself to be a shaman fundamentally before I'm a Norse pagan. But I equally respect, Christianity. So I'm a little bit of a mix of all three. And I know, as Norse pagans, but there isn't a rivalry between, where I see it, between Christianity and Norse paganism. I think we should all unite, and the Christians that accept us for who we are, and we all work together to make the world a better place. Because let's face it, Christianity is really struggling. Norse paganism is going through the roof because people want their heritage. People want to understand what their great granddad did, and what they practice. And this is why people are looking for, and trying to understand Norse paganism and the different forms of, whether you may be a cult, whether you may be practicing druidry. It's all connected. And it doesn't really matter to me who you worship, as long as you practice goodness and kindness. Because when you practice those two things in life, when you practice to be good, when you are kind to people, this is why I'm so, in the sense on the channel, so welcoming, because I live by those things. I live by the concept that I try my hardest to be good, and I try my hardest to be kind, and I wish more people would live like that. Because in the last 9 years, which I've been working on this channel, I could have chose to be selfish. I could have chose to not have a channel like this, to think about myself. But I wanted to do something different and to try to make the world a better place. Again, that is about word fame, and I do believe that. I believe that if we practice these things, we can make the world a better place. And of course, you get bad pagans and good pagans, and you're going to get equally bad Christians and good Christians. So let's get us good guys together and respect each other for our own individual faiths, or even if you don't have a faith, because not everybody believes, do they? And that's fine as well. But in the shamanic terms, so and because we lost so much evidence of shamanism, because it's all been whitewashed through history, and because shamanism, depending how you pronounce it, goes way back in time, way back to the very beginning, when we just left the caves, when we started to learn about fire, when we started to learn about plants. Now, why did we learn about plants? Because the plants have spirits, and they taught us, because that's a part of this shamanic aspect of the world we live in. So from a shamanic point of view, I got into a lot of research on shamanism, and I found one form of shamanism, which is Polynesian shamanism, to be absolutely fascinating. There's a guy called Professor, I can't remember his first name, I think it's Sergey King, who wrote a book called Urban Shaman, which I found in a random book in America in 1999 or 2001. And that book was fascinating to me. And the first aspect and the first rule within that concept of Hawaiian shamanism is that the world is what you think it is. What does that fundamentally mean, that whole concept of the world is what you think it is? Well, what it's been fundamentally saying is that whether you believe in Christ or whether you believe in, Odin, it is down to an individual belief system, because both are right. If a person believes in Christ and God and Christianity, then they're right, aren't they? Because that's their belief system. And if a person believes in the Norse way of life, then that's fundamentally right, because it's down to the individual. And of course, what is God, and why did we as human beings create all these different gods and goddesses? And we always often neglect the goddesses, but the reason for that is because, so there you were, 20, 30, 50,000 years ago, or however long it was when we were living in caves and we first started to develop language. We first learnt the fact that if you had an open hand to shake somebody, that says, I'm not holding a weapon. The ability to sing, the ability to hug, all of these aspects and all of these traits come from that shamanic past. And the shamanic past is culturally shared equally across the world, because it's so similar, the shamanic belief system. Whether you're a native Indian, whether you're an Aboriginal, they all have that aspect that they all fundamentally follows. And it's quite amazing if you studied Siberian shamanism, if you studied Hawaiian shamanism, or Polynesian is the bigger concept. And I think, we often think about the Norse being travelers, but imagine there you are, a Polynesian, and you got a little canoe, and you decide to get in the ocean and sail 4,000 miles to the next island. Oh, that's even more incredible than the Norse when you think about it. So I often say that, the Norse really are the third people that travel the most. When you think about the Irish monks, back in the 5th and 6th century, how they would have a conical boat and just get in it and sail in the sea and row and let the tides take them, or wherever they landed, they would make and build a church. That's such a brave thing to do. And no doubt the Irish early monks travelled a long distance, and left it to fate where they would land, and many of them no doubt died. So when we think about, the North travelling, now Eggle, Simon, the former and the late host, he had this amazing idea because he studied samurai culture, and he says, have you ever noticed within samurai culture and the pre-culture of Japan, the similarities between Norse paganism and the samurai culture? And he had this speculation, and well, what if there you are, you go into your longship and you get blown off course, thousands of miles, and you end up landing somehow on the coast of Japan? I mean, is that feasible? Probably not. But he had that concept that what if that did happen? Because you get yourself in a longship, and you don't always have the control of where the seas take you. And if, for instance, there was a bad storm and you managed to survive, and it moved you so far into the Atlantic that you had to go and search for land that took you past South America and a few more thousand miles, and you're in the east, could that have happened? Possibly so. But because nobody's ever found a longship in Japan. But you think about some of the evidence from America, like some of the stones they found with runic inscriptions. Now, I think some of them have been faked, no doubt about it, probably by 19th century and 18th century people that probably lived in Scandinavia and knew about the runes. But what if some of those finds were actually Scandinavian people that got lost in sea and ended up on the American coast? Now, what is it that we do as Norse people? We travel and we explore. So, and we know about Finland. We know that, in Nova Scotia, the Norse settled for a good while. And I'll come back to me in a minute, the name of it. So we know that they did find, Nova Scotia. And it makes sense. And as Eggle says, well, if you're traveling, like Leif Erikson or Eric the Red, his father, if you're traveling and you found North America, well, what is it that the Norse culture and other cultures that have the ability to sail do? They hug the coast because they knew that if they hugged the coast, they could always land and make a small settlement and make a longhouse and survive the winter. And if they're lucky enough to find the food and do the hunting, they will survive. So it does make you think. And there's certainly quite a few accounts in North America, for instance, of European bodies that have been found that are so early in North American history that they go back quite a few, over 1,000 years. So it does make you think. But again, a lot of this is speculation, which I must have to, one of those keywords I have to remember to say now and again. But until we do the research, until we actually find the archaeology, we're not going to fundamentally know, are we? So we have a comment here from Nash Tyriums 888. What's up, Braggy? Oh, not too much. Doing a bit of a live stream. How are you, my friend? And thank you for the comment. And then Solomon Riemann says, did the Vikings have projectile weapons? Yes, they did. So imagine two forces. Let's say you're in Norway and one king is fighting another king. That king wants his land and that king's got to defend himself. And you both, form up men and you go to march to fight each other. But so before the shield walls clash, first of all, you're going to have people with slings and staff slings throwing projectiles and stones. And then when the shield walls gather a little bit closer, you're going to have archers and bowmen trying to take people out. Then the javelins come over. Now, there's some speculation about throwing axes, and I don't think fundamentally you would want to throw your axe away, because if you throw your axe away, then that's a useful sidearm, and it's also an essential tool for survival. So and we definitely know about Franciscas, which are fundamentally designed to be thrown. So I'm a bit like this on throwing axes. Some days I think to myself, yes, they had throwing axes, and then other days they think to themselves, oh yes, they did not have throwing axes. And it's a bit like, I often do videos where I say, which is the most common weapon? The sax or the lang sax, which is not the best example, but if I'm saying, which is the most common weapon, the sax or the spear, Well, from the archaeological evidence, there's probably more spears found, I think, in early Anglo-Saxon graves than there is knives. But then other research kind of says the opposite. So some days I think, well, actually, sacks are the most common, and then some days I think spears are the most common. There's probably less metal, depending on the size of your knife, of course. There's probably less metal in a spearhead than there is a knife. So I'm always up for that, and I'm constantly debating with myself which is the most common weapon. But for that, we have to follow the evidence, and the evidence comes from graves mostly. But in the recent years, when we've been digging in places in the later Anglo-Saxon period, we know a lot more about the graves and what's found. But you can go so much into detail into this, you'll just go down a rabbit hole. So yes, so they do have projectile weapons, and we'll demonstrate some of these on camera. And at some point, I'm going to make a sling again and find a big field and make a staff sling and demonstrate how far you could throw something with a staff sling, which is literally a few hundred yards. It's amazingly quite far. And then Sam says, what is your favourite stylization of Jurmengander? Sorry for the spelling. Well, I don't think I have got a stylization of the world serpent. Jurmengander, of course, one of Loki's children. Let's try a different hat. It's time for a different hat. There we go. So yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. And that one, you got me. And then Solomon Riemann, I need to get glasses, says, what's were Viking sanitary hygiene like? Well, we know from the accounts of the writings from Anglo-Saxons, and especially any accounts from the Saxon women, and there are one or two accounts that the Saxon women actually preferred Viking Norse men over Saxon men, because they claim within the written evidence that the Vikings were cleaner than the Saxons. And I find that to be fascinating. And of course, yeah, you may not have a bath or a wash every day, but you certainly would want to keep your hair clean. But sometimes that's a little bit difficult to do when you're on the march. But so, yeah, and our hygiene is, there is a long form video on hygiene on the channel. And I know Egil talked about this in much more detail, because Egil was actually an archaeologist. That was his job for many years. And he dug at Sutton Hoo, he dug at the Repton dig, and was also there during the Coppergate gig. And a comment here from the Belfast Viking, Martin Brown. And he says, oh, hello. How late am I? Ha 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 ha. Very late indeed. I'm having a nice, I wish you was here, because you'll probably make something very nice out of this. And I'm having a beer, Martin. So cheers, everybody. Good health to you all. And Martin is a wonderful, amazing guy. And you're definitely on my list of people to come and visit, Martin. So we'll have to chat when you got an event, if not this year, next year. If you'd be so kind, I'll come and join you at an event. I'll drive over and get the ferry, if that's okay, and spend a weekend with you guys. I'd love to do that. So King Edward says, I remember Vikings bathed once a week, if I remember reading it somewhere on a YouTube channel. Yeah, it makes you think whether that, in the old days, like in the World War I and the Victorian age, everybody bathed on 1 day a week. So it's like a throwback to the medieval time where we would fundamentally wash once a week. I mean, I think you'll probably wash thoroughly once a week, and maybe wash your hands and your face a little bit more often. And then I think about shaving. Now, how the hell did they manage to shave? I I mean, I'm sure you could use a sharp knife and it will do the job. But I've been thinking about that quite recently. How did because not all people had a beard. Some people decide to be shaven, and especially if you're more higher class in society, because you may be able to afford to have a shave and have somebody shave for you. But we take shaving for granted. But I often think to myself, well, how did they manage to shave back in those days? And yes, fair enough. Knives were razor sharp, and you could probably get your sharp knife. And I wouldn't like to try it with a sea axe or even a modern knife. But certainly, if it was razor sharp, you could shave yourself. But I do think about that quite a bit. And then Martin says, I have mittens for you, by the way. Oh, thank you, Martin. If you need my address, say hello on Facebook, and or either that or keep them, and I'll come and visit you to pick them up specifically. If there's any excuse to travel in the future when I've got the money, the coin and the money, which I will have. And then Solomon Riemann said, did each Viking clan have their own battle prayer cry? Yeah, I mean, for that, we don't fundamentally know. Maybe so, to a certain degree. Maybe they had their own saying, for instance. So, but of course, because we don't have that evidence written down, it's hard to fundamentally say. But certainly, maybe different cultures and different clans, whether you're living in the north of Norway or the south, maybe different kingdoms have their own different chant, for instance. For instance, if you're a Mercian, you're probably going to shout, "Hail Mercia, you scum!" And if you're from Wessex, you'll be going, "Oh, hail Wessex, you Mercian scum," or the North scum, whatever. So, yes. And I think that, you certainly see that in reenactment terms, where people have their own individualistic way of shouting at somebody. I used to often shout, "Your mother's a cabbage," or "Your mother's a goat." And I used to remember it in the North saying, but I've forgotten so many of the little sayings and shouts I used to shout 25 years ago. I can always remember, Saxon him little money, Viking arm nickel money, and they can translate into two ways. That can either be translated as Saxon small men and Vikings big men, but it could also mean your manhood. So Saxon small manhood and Vikings big manhood. So boasting has been around for thousands of years. And of course, it's intimidation. It's about psychology, even though they had no concept of what psychology is and how the brain works, for instance, on a neurological aspect of people. But psychology is such an thing. It's like, banging your shield before the shield wall. Imagine 1,000 men screaming and shouting. For instance, if you're a Saxon army, you may be a little bit more restrained than the Norse, because the Norse had a reputation to keep. And, when you hear about how they shaved the teeth, so they had pointy teeth and doing crazy things like that. Which, whether they did that, I don't know. But I certainly read accounts of it. So psychology in warfare is such a massive thing. And definitely in reenactment terms, when I've been fighting, when I'm fighting maybe a Saxon, and because often we don't always fight in a shield wall. Some days it's more individual fighting and everybody takes somebody else on, especially if you're fighting with honour in a ring, for instance, when you all stand in a ring and then it's a last man standing, especially with honour, so you can't stab somebody in the back and be dishonourable. So you go up to a Saxon and you scream at them, "Ah, Viking!" You can certainly, I know, probably deafened you now. That's intimidation, and I certainly have had reenactors, look at me and kind of like take a step back and even run away. But it's not as funny as an account from. There's a guy from the Derby area called Ulf, and I think his brother-in-law or one of his relatives was at a battle reenactment, and he saw this small Saxon guy. So he decides to run up and do a double kick with his feet into his chest. But then he realised afterwards that this guy was 75 years old. And he like said, "Oh Jesus, by the gods, I just got up and double kicked, or got my leg up and kicked this guy in the chest to knock him over." And I didn't realise that he was like in his 70s, and he felt really bad about it. And then I did the video the other day where I made a short video where I kind of like screamed like a Viking, and my neighbours were looking at me rather funny, thinking, "What's going on here?" But everybody in my area knows me as Andy the Viking. And then I need to get glasses. Nastertium 888 says the channel is awesome. I enjoy seeing the short videos every day. Well, thank you very much. And it's been really nice in the last few months that we're getting good growth. And I know I put out a lot of videos, but that's because I got an awful lot of videos to put out. If I put out one short a day and one long form video a day, in 5 years' time, I'll have 10,000 videos not published. And I've literally got, I think on the channel, there's altogether there's about 6,000 videos on the channel, and we've already got 3,850 published. There's probably 3,000 to 5,000 videos on my PC. I've been very, very prolific. And yeah, I've made mistakes. I've learned lessons with good content, but I'm trying to get better every day. And you'll notice this week I've changed the format of the thumbnails on the short videos. So when we started doing short videos back in 2020, I didn't really use a thumbnail in the videos. That concept had not come to mind. And then last year when I was making thumbs, I was putting the thumbnails during the edit if I was editing on my phone on YouTube Create. And now, because I've got my PC up and running again, I was putting the thumbnails in my PC, but then I realised about 6 weeks ago or 2 months that YouTube added a feature where you can actually go to YouTube itself, select your channel, select your shorts video, and you can add a title, which is why I'm going back and rebranding all my shorts videos, because I made too many mistakes with too many emojis in the titles, which don't work. Capital letters don't work. Question marks in the titles does work. So I'm having to rebrand a lot of those videos. So not only am I trying to produce new videos, I filmed about 40 videos today, about 5 or 6 short videos, the rest are shorts. I filmed on Monday and Tuesday. So on average at the moment, I'm getting in my kit. Oh, look, disconnected again. Why is it after 90 minutes, it always disconnects? Or, bloody Loki. If I ever meet him, I'm going to kick him. Don't bloody damn hard in the balls. He will definitely know it's me. And he'll probably scream as well. And, and get Venrir to bite me. So what I've done recently is I'm now started to produce my thumbnails as an actual thumbnail, and I'm just flashing it up for like 1/10 of a second. So you'll see it in the video, but it'll be so quick. And then that's what's happening in the last 2 or 3 days, because I watched a video and from a guy called Benjamin. I do watch a lot of content on how to do YouTube, because you have to keep up with it. And because the algorithm keeps changing and the format keeps changing, but I'm just trying to get better and better and give you better quality. And I hope I don't produce, rubbish videos, but I don't think I do. I think I produce quality videos, and like I said, for the first time ever on the channel's history, I'm actually preparing the video beforehand, like the title and a description and a concept, and then I'm filming it. For the last 8 years, I've gone into my garden and thought, today I'm going to film a video on the Langsats, and I just stand there and record a video. I've never had scripts. I mean, we often, the new thing on YouTube is what you call the granddad way of filming, where you sit in front of a camera and you just speak your mind in a very raw way. Well, we've been doing that for 9 years. This is our 9th year. This is the year when we're going to really take off on YouTube, I think. And there's so many good things to come on the channel. And, I want to, have people like Martin on the channel, and perhaps do a few videos with you, Martin, because I think you've got a great deal of knowledge. And I love you to bits for all the support and your friendship. I know we never met It's like Eirik. I never met Eirik in my life, but he is truly my younger brother, as you all are my brothers and my sisters, my brothers and sisters. And this is what the channel is about. It's about family, it's about connection, and it's about trying to teach you a little bit each day. Yeah, and I'm experimenting with, I made a load of one-liners for videos. I've got quite a lot of them to do, because it's about breaking up the content and trying to open it up to YouTube, but at the same time trying to keep this original idea of the medieval world and trying to tie it in with that. So, you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. And oh boy, I made a lot of mistakes. I could write a book on it, but it'll probably be outdated in a year's time. So just go back to some of your comments. So bear with me. So King Edward says, I know the Scottish clans have their own war cry. Some of the Scottish Gaelic and some of the Latin, for example, Bua Idea, Nobas is the war cry and motto of the MacNeil clan, which is the Scottish Gaelic for victory. Oh, that's fascinating, but it's a bit like the war cry of the Confederates from the American Civil War, although there are recorded accounts from Confederate veterans who lived, and amazingly, some of them lived until World War One. I find that amazing, but let alone some of the widows that were still living in the 90s and the early 2000s. Just imagine that. But a whole entire subject for a whole entirely different day. But so war cries are sorts of fascinating things. And then Martin says, Viking slaves could buy themselves free, or your dad could slave you out till any money owed was paid. As for most things, life for a slave depends on the owner. Yes, it does. It really does. But one of the aspects about Norse culture and the medieval culture is that, you could be taken a slave and you could become a free man. You could become an earl and you could become a king. And that's what's fascinating about this culture. And, slavery is such a bad thing. But, in the modern world, we're all slaves to the system, but we just don't fundamentally realize it. So we are fundamentally slaves by consent, because you consent to getting a job and getting a mortgage and to paying all your fines to the government. And Solomon Weeman says 799, cool. And then Martin says, I spend Tuesdays shouting a lot at kids running around with axes, swords, etc. Yeah, I used to do that with Eggle. And then Turkey, he started doing that in the early mid-80s, actually. He was one of the very first people in the UK to go around the educational system and, scream at kids. But he often talks about, on many occasions, because he's got a Iron Age impression and he's got an Iron Age horned helmet, how dangerous they are in schools, with the amount of times he's knocked his Iron Age horns, which are made of metal, into teachers. And I find that to be fascinating. And then Solomon Riemann says, was there Vikings recorded going to America? Yes. There's a settlement in Nova Scotia, but I can't remember the name at the moment. It's in there somewhere. And of course, if you read about the saga of Leif Erikson, Eric's the Red Son, he talks about discovering the saga Vinland, and Vinland is said to be North America. And I think we've got a lot more data and evidence to come, but it's not been found. And then King Edward says, Turbulent, will you be going to the Viking Festival in Shetland Islands? One of the places I want to visit in the future. Well, yes, definitely in the future. I'll be up for that because, I'm going to be lucky enough where I can just travel every week if I wanted to. So it's on my list of places to go to because I want to go and see the festival and the ship burning. And then Martin says, I'll be in York in September for a week. I want to see the poo for the first time. Yes. And of course, Eggle used to talk about the famous preserved poo, which is from which was found under the Bank of England in London, and they call it the Bank of England poo. And it's a medieval, from our period of history, somebody's, shit, pardon the language, but it's an old word. Yes, and King Edward, Martin says, King Edward, I was supposed to be in Shetland for the Vikings this year, but EasyJet called off our flights. Yeah, really? Is that because of the current crisis with the fuel? And then the Belfast Viking Martin says, took 2 tables full of toys, helmets, shields, etc. Yeah. So when we had after the Derby group collapsed, we formed a new group, and I came up with the name Ancient Alive. And we had a very good reputation. In fact, within the first year, we got hired by the Jorvik Centre to go around all these different cities and put on displays to advertise the Jorvik Centre. But one of those things we had to do was to give the children toy swords and shields, and we would line up with our shield, and they would come and fight us. And I tell you now, I mean, Saxons are brutal, but kids are 10 times more brutal. Trust me, and I know, Martin, you've experienced this. So if you're in a little arena and you give plastic swords and shields to children, they're going to absolutely pulverize you and be brutal. So my technique was to die on the first blow and then call myself up into a ball and put my shield above me, because they were coming up and kicking you and smacking you and beating the absolute living crap out of you. Yeah, children are brutal. They should have sent a load of children in the Saxons' time to fight, William the Conqueror, and they would have won. And then Martin said, no weather, simple, it was so bad, couldn't get flights home or flights to match up. But you must better get a ferry to Shetland, can't you? Because it'd be quite nice. And I keep toying with the idea of buying a van and then travelling in a van and having somewhere to stay, and then going to Scotland, around the islands, and going to all the amazing places there and filming. Now, I am going to have to go in a minute, because A, it's very late. B, I need the toilet, because I've had beer. And C, I've got to get up early in the morning. So I'm going to get to the point now to say that I'm going to call it a night, because it's been 3 hours 45. I've already got a dry throat from talking on camera for the last for 3 days this week. And I want to try to reserve some energy for filming on Saturday, get some more content in the bag. But tomorrow, I've got a video where I'm showing how I de-rusted a spear and put a spearhead on my spear shaft. I think it's fascinating, Martin, that you use bolts and had the ability to take yours off. I think that's fascinating. And I'm fairly certain you can take your spear shaft apart, can't you, like a snooker cue? And I find that to be quite fascinating as well. So Solomon Riemann says, when's your next live? Well, trying to predict anything in my life is extremely difficult, because I do know what I'm doing tomorrow, but hopefully I'm trying to do one on a Sunday if I can next. So, but you never know. It can be quite spontaneous, but I do, and I must try to get back into live streaming, because I'm trying to get to my 4,000 hours so I can be monetized, because YouTube are making 700, nearly £1,000 a month out of me. And I want to get some of that revenue so I can reinvest it and buy more weapons. And hopefully, if we blow up, have a longhouse built, which I think I can do. So I'm going to say good night, or good night in the old tongue. And thank you for all the lovely comments and all you guys watching. You've been absolutely fabulous. And I think this has been a very fascinating live stream. And yeah, I should do this more often. So I'll fare thee well, and look out for tomorrow's videos. And then Saturday, I'm going to put out the video on how Ragnar Lothbrok died. Do watch out for that video, because I think it's one of the best videos I've recorded out of all the videos I've done. When I filmed it, I was very impressed. When I edited it, I was very impressed. And I sent it to Eric, you know, the man of many accents, and he said that's bloody amazing. And it's nice to tell a little story from history. And I've got a lot more in the bag, and I've got a lot more to record. And I just want to give you a few more folk tales and a few more stories. So for me, it's goodbye. I'm going to go and eat my ham, drink my beer, and get to bed. So good night and fare thee well. A brilliant, brilliant live stream, but I've got to figure out how you end it now. Goodbye, folks.